Chapter 1686. Today my brothers and I will go on our way together. Yi Qinshan suddenly smiled tragically. Before Qinyu died, he said that he didn't have the face to go to heaven to meet Father. How can you and I let Qinyu enjoy the limelight? Our brothers are all waiting for us in the underworld. Setting off from the underworld together is what's truly joyous. Zhuge Zangqiong suddenly lowered his head with a downcast expression. He murmured, "It's good to go to the underworld together. What happened to Uncle Jun's family back then is still fresh in our minds. Even if we can really go to heaven and meet Father, how should we tell him? If we do, how will Father and the rest be able to face Uncle Jun? Since we've already been humiliated, then let's just end it here. Don't let our elders feel ashamed anymore." Yi Qinshan, Shi Baoxiao and Zhuge Zangqiong sighed at the same time. They actually said in unison, "I really envy Ling Muyang and Li Chuanbua." The three of them smiled wryly at the same time. They were speechless and silent for a moment. Ling Muyang and Li Chuanbua were the only two who didn't participate in the incident back then. The others had all participated directly or indirectly. Now it was truly too late for regrets. They regretted it so much. Why is it that our elders can live and die together but we can't? Yi Qinshan laughed wryly. With his hands behind his back he said solemnly, "Before Qinyu died, he once said that he only regretted not being able to relive his life. Then, which one of our elders needs to relive their lives? Even death wouldn't make such a sigh, right?" Zhuge Zangqiong smiled bitterly. "Big brother, this is different in the first place. There's no room for comparison between the two at all. The reason why our father's generation remained steadfast in life and death was because they had gone through far too many things together and gone through far too many trials and tribulations together. So-called friendship is nourished bit by bit through adversity. Our lives have been too smooth. We don't know what hardship is, what predicament is, and what true friendship is. Our lives have been too smooth?" Yi Qinshan and Shi Baoxiao shuddered at his words. "We have experienced too few things together. Moreover, our goals are different and we always have our own plans. Therefore, even though we have the protection of our parents and were once together, we still can't be of one mind. However, at least we were able to understand those emotions. That's why we were able to wake up in the end. That's already pretty good even though it was a little late." Zhuge Zangqiong said, "Comprehending is comprehending. Once you comprehend, you get it. Although we're not as heroic as our fathers, we're still much stronger than some people who live their lives in ignorance." Shi Baoxiao burst out laughing. "That's right. Some people don't even know the word comradeship until they die. Their eyes are only filled with benefits. In fact, when some people told stories about the importance of friendship and righteousness, these people would refute with their white teeth, 'How can there be such brotherhood in this world? This kind of person is even more pitiful and laughable than us. Ignorance isn't a sin, but speaking irresponsibly and slandering beautiful things is the most detestable thing in the world.' Yi Qinshan couldn't help but chuckle as well. However, those people are just as detestable as us. It's all because we haven't experienced it, and they haven't had the opportunity or the ability to do so. Comparatively speaking, we are even more detestable than they are. Because we still have our fathers in front of us." The three of them smiled bitterly. In the face of death, the three brothers chatted and talked, and they actually seemed to have forgotten about themselves. There wasn't the desolate feeling of being on the road to the netherworld at all. Outside the city, the Dharma Supreme's army had suffered great losses after the series of battles. Their numbers had shrunk by at least a third or more. In the series of battles to the death, both sides were basically fighting with their lives on the line. Although the allied army of the great clans was completely wiped out, the losses on the law enforcement officers' side were also extremely tragic. There was really no victory to speak of. Even saying that they had gained the upper hand was very difficult. Although the heavy rain that was rarely seen in 100 years had gradually lessened, it still continued to pour down. The battlefield had once again been cleaned up by the law enforcement officers. Other than an extremely thick blood stench, it was as if there had never been a battle. Another large batch of kerosene was poured on the pile of corpses. The flames once again soared hundreds of feet high in the rain. The noisy heat waves sent black ashes into the air, which were once again drenched by the rain and scattered on the ground within 1,000 miles. The law enforcement officers' army outside the city was in a somewhat low mood. The flying flags that had once covered the sky were now drenched by the rain. They hung limply on the flagpoles like dead fish, no longer showing any signs of life. The law enforcement officers in the south had already started to prepare for the final battle. Obviously, everyone knew that the next one to fight would definitely be the Zhuge clan. Shi Baoxiao laughed. "Zhuge, I'm the only one left in the Shi clan. How about letting me play with all of you during this battle? Zhuge Zangqiong laughed. Very good. The two of us shall travel together to the netherworld. Yi Qinshan said dispassionately, how can brothers travel together without any gifts? I shall use half of the Yi clan's combat power to travel together for the two of you. Good. The two of us shall kindly accept Brother Ye's gift. Both Zhuge Zangqiong and Shi Paoxiao laughed at the same time. In this case, the two of us will definitely give the Dharma Supreme a huge shock and let him know that not everything in the world is under his control. Right at this moment, the Dharma Supreme actually stopped remaining silent and looked up. The Shao clan is gone, the Qin clan is gone, and so is the home. The Lan clan has long disappeared, the Li clan is a pile of ashes, and the Shi clan has become a dead zone. Now only the Yi clan and the Zhuge clan are left. Ling Muyang from the Ling clan and Shi Paoxiao from the Shi clan. There was a faint smile in the Dharma Supreme's eyes. He asked, is the other side ready? Reporting to the Dharma Supreme, everything is ready. We're just waiting for your command. The Dharma Supreme said softly, since everything is ready, let's begin. Yes. The Dharma Supreme looked up at the top of the city again as if wanting to say something. Suddenly, there was an inexplicable tremor in his expression. He looked up at the sky as if looking at something unbelievable. Not only the Dharma Supreme but everyone else almost at the same time. They all did the same thing. The rain that had been pouring down incessantly from the sky actually stopped abruptly at this moment. It stopped abruptly. Immediately after, a fierce gust of wind started blowing at the same time. Above the boundless sky, there seemed to be a kind of boundless majesty that was pressing down fiercely. Winds and clouds from all directions were rapidly converging here. The clouds in the sky became thicker and thicker, and the howling gust of wind also became stronger and stronger. Then, from a certain direction in the capital city, beams of bright white light suddenly shot into the sky. The thick layer of clouds in the sky suddenly dispersed, and every ray of white light was tightly wrapped by the thick clouds. After completely surrounding the white light, the thick clouds slowly started to rotate on their own. That kind of aura that was enough to destroy the heavens and earth became clearer and more obvious. Everyone counted. There were a total of 14 beams of white light that shot into the sky. There were as many as 14 beams of white light. The layers of clouds in the sky gradually formed 14 huge whirlpools that rotated slowly. Between the flashes of lightning, they were like brilliant silver snakes that shuttled back and forth in the sky, faintly discernible. The Dharma Supreme stood up abruptly and looked at the sky. A trace of shock flashed across his face. He could clearly feel that among the 14 beams of white light, there were at least a few auras that he was familiar with. Immediately after, the corners of his mouth revealed a hint of a meaningful smile. To be able to raise your cultivation at the last moment, and to be able to raise it to such an extent. Tribulation Sword Master, you are indeed capable. The legend of tribulation is indeed not in vain. Really not bad. He immediately turned and said, the operation over there, hurry up. Finish this battle as soon as possible. Yes. The Dharma Supreme looked at the strange and powerful whirlpools in the sky. His gaze was deep. After a long time he said indifferently, Tribulation Sword Master, fight with me. The battle that I look forward to the most. At the inn, Yu Lingxue, Feng Yuro and her husband as well as Ling Muyang, all looked solemn. The three of them had long swords in their hands and were extremely vigilant. In the past 2 days and 2 nights, there were already several batches of people who wanted to enter this inn. A portion of them were secretly sent by the law enforcement officers to gather information. More people came to take a look out of curiosity. One had to admit that there were still quite a lot of brainless people in this world. They clearly knew that the people here were not people they could afford to offend, but they still charged in, just to satisfy their own curiosity. After all, the breakthrough of Chu Yang and the rest had caused too much of a commotion. Although no one could see the exact situation, that extremely powerful aura could be clearly felt within a radius of tens of miles. From today onwards, no one from the law enforcement officers has come to spy on us. Yu Lingxue was a little tired. He deeply knew how important the breakthrough of Chu Yang and the rest was this time. He didn't even dare to take a step away from them, not even daring to slack off for a moment. If someone really barged in and affected the cultivation of these 14 people, Yu Lingxue really couldn't imagine what kind of consequences it would cause. Just thinking about it made him break out in cold sweat. Yes. Ling Muyang's expression was mixed with obvious sadness. He also didn't dare to move. Although he knew that his brothers were fighting for their lives in front, he also knew clearly that the breakthrough that was going on in this room was related to the future of the heavenly continent. If he went, he would only die in battle. It might be satisfying for a moment, but it wouldn't be beneficial to the overall situation. However, as long as they could wait until Chuyang and the rest came out, they would have a chance to stop the madness of the Dharma Supreme. This was already their last and only hope. As everyone waited anxiously, they saw streaks of white light suddenly rushing out of the room without any warning. They rushed into the sky. It's done. Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro jumped up. It's done? Ling Muyang's voice was trembling. He felt that his teeth were chattering and even his voice had changed pitch. These three people were all old monsters who were more than 10,000 years old. They were usually known for their steadiness, but today, it seemed that they had used up all their steadiness, leaving only excitement and shock. This must be the legendary realm, heaven and man as one, the white rainbow piercing the sun, thunder roaring in the sky, dragons soaring on the earth. The first 2 chapters are finally completed. I'll explain the reason below. Everyone knows my temper. If I don't update, I won't explain. Because no matter what the reason is, it's too late, hee. So there's no need to explain. Since there's an update, then I must explain, ha. Today one of our authors is here for a book signing at Lai Wu. This is the first friend to come to Lai Wu for a book signing. I'm very happy, I'm very honored. So I have to do my part as a host. That's all for the explanation, okay? Even if it's someone else, as long as my brothers come here, I have to entertain them. I cherish this true feeling from the illusory network very much, because it doesn't bring any benefits. Speaking of this, I have to flaunt myself or explain something. Many of my brothers have come here before, including the original and pirated ones. But when they come here, I won't let my brothers spend a single cent. Whether you believe it or not, there's already proof. All the brothers who have come here have also said this. Today's update is late. I don't ask for your monthly votes, nor do I ask for your understanding. But I just want you to understand that I, Feng Ling, am like this. I cherish all of you. Just like how I cherish all the brothers who have come here before. There's no difference. Those who like me still like me and those who scold me still scold me. But I'm still Feng Ling. Feng Ling is the world. Chapter 1687. Yu Lingxue said excitedly, this is the ultimate realm beyond the limits of the heavenly level martial arts. I didn't expect that I, Yu Lingxue, would have the chance to see such a phenomenon in my lifetime. Ling Muyang was dumbfounded. He had always treated this as a legend. Because, since ancient times, no one had ever reached this realm in the heavenly level continent. In other words, this was a realm that shouldn't be possible in the heavenly level continent. Even among the legendary masters of the Calamity Sword, no one had ever reached this legendary realm. According to the ancient legends, it was during the time when dragons and phoenixes were rampant and the 3 stars wreaked havoc. There were people who had such cultivation, but it was only a legend and not recorded in the ancient books. As for those who had seen it with their own eyes, it was definitely you. Therefore, there is no one who can truly prove the existence of this realm. In fact, Ling Muyang had never believed in the existence of such a realm. But now, this legend really happened in front of him. And 14 of them appeared together at once. Ling Muyang couldn't accept this result and this fact. I'm afraid there will be thunder in the sky next. Yu Lingxue said solemnly, let's stay here for a while more. When the thunder surges, we have to leave immediately. Otherwise, we will be blasted into pieces by the aftermath of the thunder. Legend has it that they have to endure the test of the thunder. As long as they pass it, if they can't leave the heavenly level continent in a short time, there will be experts from the upper realm coming to capture them. Their current realm has exceeded the limit of what the heavenly level continent can bear. Or rather, they are no longer existences in our realm. Before he could finish his sentence, a low and majestic sound of thunder came from the sky. Oh, rumble, how can it be so fast? Yu Lingxue was shocked and shouted, let's leave quickly. Everyone in the inn rushed out at the same time and flew out under the lead of the 3 people. They had just gone less than 1,000 feet when a vortex in the sky suddenly pressed down. The center of the vortex. A green thunderbolt as thick as an arm. It struck down suddenly. Boom. There was an abnormally strong rumble and the earth shook in response. Feng and Yu, as well as Ling Muyang and the other 2, were sent flying by an indescribable force at the same time. They felt dizzy and when they landed they were actually thousands of feet away. On the contrary, Huang Xiaoyou and the others weren't as embarrassed as the 3 top experts. Light of heavenly punishment. The stronger you meet, the stronger you become. Yu Lingxue's gaze was filled with reverence as he looked at the lightning falling from the sky continuously. He said reverently, the heavens are indeed compassionate towards the common people. Such a lightning tribulation is directly felt by everyone. It only takes the appearance of one expert to turn everything within a radius of 1,000 miles into charcoal. But now, the ordinary people close to them are only ordinary charred lightning descending upon the world. It won't really harm the body. Ling Muyang panted heavily and said, "That's right. We supreme martial artists also have different stages of lightning tribulations, but the power is enough to shock everyone around us to death. So, once we reach the stage where we need to face the lightning tribulation, we have to find a relatively secluded place. I originally thought that the breakthrough of Chu Yang and the others this time might destroy the entire city, but I never thought that it would actually be unharmed. This result is far beyond my expectations." Feng Yuro sighed and said, "This is the so-called realm, under the three people's reverent gazes. The vortex in the sky. One after another it started to show its power. Bolts of lightning struck the tavern almost without any gap between them. The tribulation clouds seemed to be pressing down on the top of their heads. Later on, the lightning turned into a rainstorm. Countless bolts of lightning struck down gradually from all directions in the sky, but they all landed at the same spot. This also caused all the lightning to seem to have completely merged together after striking down to a certain extent, forming a huge lightning bolt that wasn't very thick. Under this endless heavenly power, everyone kept quiet out of fear. Even the great battle outside the city temporarily stopped due to this change in the heavens and earth. The lightning that had always been just a flash had now become a huge entity that existed continuously in the sky, covering a radius of thousands of miles. Then it poured down towards a fixed spot in an extremely frenzied manner. Looking at this heavenly power that was enough to destroy everything, everyone's face was full of solemnity. On the law enforcement officer's side, almost everyone's face was full of worry. The endless lightning might be intimidating, but the real danger was yet to come. The appearance of such a lightning tribulation also meant that the other party would have many strong reinforcements. And the sudden appearance of so many super experts from the other party was definitely not a good thing. Only the Dharma Supreme had a faint smile on his face. He looked at the lightning in the sky indifferently, as if deep in thought, as if he had lost something, but also as if he had gained something. Between the thoughts of gains and losses, endless thoughts ran through his mind. Behind that faint smile, there was only calmness. As the only heavenly demon seed of the extraterrestrial demons in the heavens and earth, facing the imminent arrival of powerful enemies, he actually only had calmness. He even looked forward to it. Yi Qinshan and the rest looked at the lightning in the sky, their originally miserable faces finally relaxed. Finally he felt more relaxed, but there was still a heavy sigh. Within the capital city, flames soared into the sky. A wave of chaos spread from the center of the city to the south. "Big brother, is the Yi clan's base camp on fire?" Zhuge Sanxiong's entire body shook as he exclaimed. This question that sounded both doubtful and certain exposed Zhuge Sanxiong's imbalanced state of mind. If even the last base camp on the Yi clan's side fell, this battle would be a complete failure, and there would be no chance of a comeback. That's right, it's the Yi clan. At this moment Yi Qinshan was unusually calm. He turned back indifferently and looked at the source of the fire, listening to the commotion there. His expression was so calm that it was somewhat frightening. It was clearly the Yi clan's base camp that had suffered a major attack, but as the founder of the Yi clan, Yi Qinshan actually seemed indifferent. "Big brother, let's go back immediately, otherwise everything will." Zhuge Sanxiong cried out in shock and anger. "There's no need for that." Yi Qinshan smiled bitterly. But just by looking at the momentum of the fire and hearing the loud commotion, and thinking about how big the Yi clan's territory is, it's already too late. With such a comprehensive attack, other than the experts of the law enforcement officers, no other force can do it. "Aren't you going to MNGB?" Right from the start, the Dharma Supreme was determined to exterminate the big clans. If we go back at this moment, it will only allow the law enforcement officers led by the Dharma Supreme to move ahead. Once we lose our presence, the enemy will definitely take advantage of the situation and charge into the city, changing the battlefield outside the city to inside the city. We've really reached that point. Not only all the martial artists but even the tens of millions of commoners will also suffer. And the Yi clan can't avoid the fate of being exterminated. Since we're destined to be exterminated no matter what, we might as well have a decisive battle here. Apart from giving the innocent commoners in the city a little more chance of survival, I believe that we can also make the law enforcement officers pay a little more. At this final moment, let us die a little more gloriously. Yi Qinshan smiled bitterly in a low voice. Zhuge Zhangqiong and Shi Paoxiao gritted their teeth and clenched their fists. Their gazes were filled with sorrow. The Tribulation Sword Master has obviously improved to a level that we can't imagine. Now that we've seen such improvement, they have the ability to deal with the Dharma Supreme. I believe that even if the big clans are exterminated, just like in the past, they can only wait to be killed in the face of such a Tribulation Sword Master. In the face of absolute power, any force is just like smoke. Yi Qinshan smiled bitterly. But now they have brought hope to the heavens, the last hope. We, the sworn enemies of the Tribulation Sword Master, have no need to meet him again. Or rather, we'll only have each other's troubles when we meet. After we die, this piece of shiji, we'll entrust it to him. Ah! Everyone was speechless. Yes, there was the Dharma Supreme before. And then there was the Tribulation Sword Master. The fate of the big clans had actually been decided long ago. Yi Qinshan turned around and looked at Diwu Qingru. Clan Master Diwu, if there are any surviving descendants of the big clans in the future, please take care of them. Even if our souls are gone, we'll still be grateful. Diwu Qingru could only sigh. Rest assured, ancestors. After this battle, as long as we can survive, Qingru will definitely not forget what Elder Yi has entrusted us with. I'll never give up. Yi Qinshan turned around slowly and looked at the law enforcement officers outside the city. He said softly, "We don't have to wait for the lightning to end. Zhangqiong, let's fight to the death. Whether it's the Tribulation Sword Master or the Dharma Supreme, there will always be a victor in the end. But that victor will definitely not be us. Therefore, I don't want to see the final victor be them. Although we're losers, we also have our dignity and pride." Zhuge Zhangqiong could only let out a sigh of relief. All the panic he felt earlier was gone. He looked up to the sky and shouted, "Let's fight. Dharma Supreme, let your law enforcement officers from the south fight. I want to make them pay for the blood debt of extermination." A hint of a cruel smile appeared on the Dharma Supreme's originally calm face. Waving his hand, his voice pierced through the lightning as he said elegantly, "As you wish." With a loud crash, the law enforcement officers from the south walked out of the arena. Zhuge Zhangqiong laughed and bowed deeply to Yi Qinshan. Then he turned and strode down the city wall, not looking back at all. Shi Paoxiao walked up to Yi Qinshan and bowed. Then he straightened his back and followed behind Zhuge Zhangqiong. The surviving supreme martial artists from the Zhuge clan bowed one by one and walked down. When they spoke to anyone else, all of them straightened their backs and left. With a smile on his face, Yi Qinshan raised his hands and bowed deeply. His expression was still indifferent. At the inn, Chu Yang and the others were all doing their best to endure the baptism of endless lightning. Life can't be repeated after all. But fortunately, there was a physical book that gave me a chance to correct my mistakes. At present, the first 3 episodes of Pride, Reversible Heavens, King of Hell Chu, and Heavenly Armament Pavilion have been NG'd. The 4th episode is in preparation. The content will definitely not disappoint everyone. I hope that the brothers and sisters who have the ability to support me will give me your support. I also wish everyone the best of luck to see a different Pride. Have a more comfortable reading pleasure. Thank you. Chapter 1688. Each of these lightning bolts actually had 2 completely opposite attributes. Everyone could clearly feel that this was a gift from the heavens, but it was also accompanied by a test. If one could withstand the test, they would receive the gift. Because the lightning bolts had destruction, but they were also accompanied by great vitality. As long as one tried their best to withstand one lightning bolt, then there would be a new vitality that would instantly replenish the body's previous exhaustion. Then another lightning bolt would strike. Therefore, as long as one reached this level, as long as one tried their best, withstanding the lightning bolts would definitely not be a problem. With this understanding, everyone was pleasantly surprised. Such a gift from the heavens may only come once in one's life. After accepting this lightning bolt, in terms of essence, we are no longer the same as people of this world. Therefore, these vitalities should be the acknowledgement of our identity by the Heaven Imperial Court. But this acknowledgement should only come once. If there is any more advancement in the future, once the lightning bolt strikes the heavenly tribulation, then life and death will be at stake. It will definitely not be as easy as it is now. Wu Jueqing's voice rang out. Wu Jueqing's experience and knowledge could be said to be the best in the heaven. Even the Dharma Supreme, Ning Tianya and Bu Luqing could not compare to him in this aspect. The conclusion he gave was reasonable and should be the closest to the truth. Everyone was enlightened. A lightning bolt may be a destructive crisis, but it is also a good opportunity for advancement. Wu Jueqing's calm voice had some uncontrollable excitement. Therefore, everyone must make good use of this opportunity. When the lightning bolts are over, our advancement this time will be completely stable. If there is any advancement in the future, it should be after we reach the Heaven Imperial Court. Chu Yang tried his best to withstand the lightning bolts as he said, besides, everyone must be prepared. Right now the battle outside is already in full swing. Once we finish upgrading, what awaits us is likely to be an immediate battle with the Dharma Supreme. This is our last battle in the heavenly layer. For our homeland we must do our best. Yes. Everyone answered in unison. At this moment, Xie Danxiong's voice suddenly rang out. After this advancement, what level will our cultivation reach? This question made everyone smile bitterly. How would we know what level we are at? After a moment of awkward silence, Mo Tianji said, I'm afraid we'll have to wait until we reach the Heaven Palace to know the details. But, one thing we can be sure of is that our cultivation has definitely surpassed the upper limit of the Supreme Martial Artist level. There's no doubt about this. I don't think I'll be able to reach that level. Everyone burst into laughter when they heard this, but it lightened the originally cold and solemn atmosphere. Low-rank supremacy. Once upon a time, it could be said that it was a level that no one could see even if they looked up to it. Illusory and ethereal, it was like a god in the sky. But now, at this moment, it was so easily crossed over. Everything. It was all because of one person. Chu Yang. Outside the city, the battle had begun once again. There was still no command for the new wave of battles. The Dharma Supreme reclined on the chair, coldly watching the battle between the two armies below, his expression indifferent. No one knew what he was thinking. Dense devil chi gradually gathered on his body. It seemed that this devil chi was floating out from the heads of everyone in the law enforcement officer army. Then they gradually returned to the top of the Dharma Supreme's head. In the end it entered his body. This went on and on, one cycle after another. The smile on the Dharma Supreme's lips seemed to become even wider. In the city, the sounds of battle gradually became softer. Previously, Yi Qinshan had already deployed all the Yi clan's elites to the battlefield. There weren't any experts left to guard the Yi clan at all. When they suddenly encountered a devastating attack from the law enforcement officers, they were completely annihilated before they could form any effective resistance. The Yi clan was destroyed. But regarding this, the founder of the Yi clan, Yi Qinshan, only frowned in pain. He didn't send anyone back to help at all. The battle outside the city was in full swing. The two supreme martial artists, Zhuge Zangxiong and Shi Baoxiao, led the army to attack. Together with another supreme martial artist, a junior supreme martial artist from the Zhuge clan, the sharp point formed by these three people could be said to be invincible, stirring up huge waves of blood in the law enforcement officers' camp. Although the troops under them were a motley crew with the three people's powerful attacks, they actually managed to suppress the law enforcement officers to a disadvantage for a moment. The role of high-level martial artists in battle was fully displayed by these three people. In addition to their tyrannical martial strength, the three of them were also fighting with the determination to die. The valiance of their combat strength, under the urging of their mentality of not caring about their own lives, was already unparalleled in their desire to die first. Thus, the resulting combat strength was naturally extremely sharp. If that was the case, there were still many high-level martial artists on the law enforcement officers' side who didn't participate in the battle. If they really attacked with all their might, they could still kill these three people in one go. At least, it wouldn't create such a terrible situation now. However, this strategy, which was supposed to be a matter of course, was strictly stopped by the Dharma Supreme. But due to the Dharma Supreme's arbitrary decision, the high-level martial artists could only watch helplessly. Gut Sangxiong and the rest were killing their own people like cutting vegetables, but there was nothing they could do but watch helplessly and anxiously. In the sky, the lightning continued to flash and didn't seem to weaken at all. On the battlefield, both sides continued to fight with their lives on the line. The battle cries almost shook the entire sky. The martial artists who participated in the battle were falling down in batches. At any moment, there would be countless swords and sabers greeting someone at the same time. Then, a living person would be instantly turned into pieces of flesh flying all over the sky under such terrifying attacks. Right from the start of the battle, both sides were fighting with their lives on the line. The number of people who were still standing was gradually decreasing, and the number of people who fell was also increasing. Large amounts of blood once again stained the earth red, and then converged into a river, flowing and spreading silently amidst the earth-shattering battle cries. On the other side there were flames and black smoke soaring into the sky, and piles of corpses towering into the clouds. The earth was shaking and the heavens were shaking. After a long time, in the sky, the lightning that was almost non-stop previously finally disappeared by a large margin. The battlefield also returned to silence. Looking over, all that could be seen was a sea of corpses. In the midst of the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood, only 3 people could still stand with difficulty. There was even one who staggered and almost fell. After swaying a few times, he finally steadied himself. Zhuge Zhangqiong Shirpaoho, and that low-grade supreme martial artist from the Zhuge clan. In a battle of 1,000,000 people, only 3 people were still alive. Everyone else had turned into corpses. The final result of this battle was actually the victory of the allied forces of the clans. Zhuge Zhangqiong's usual wise demeanor and steady demeanor had long since vanished. He was panting heavily, his entire body riddled with wounds, fresh blood constantly flowing out of his mouth. Suddenly he bent down and laughed loudly, actually laughing so heartily. Ah! Revenge. I've finally taken revenge. Zhuge Zhangqiong threw his head back and laughed. He roared, "Do you see the hundreds of thousands of dead souls sacrificed by the Zhuge clan? All the executioners who destroyed our clan are lying here now. All of them are lying here. I've taken revenge for all of you. All of you can rest in peace now." He laughed heartily, but tears were gushing out crazily. Tears flowed freely, but they were accompanied by laughter that shook the heavens. One of his arms was broken and swaying in front of him, but Zhuge Zhangqiong didn't notice at all. Shirpaoho stood upright and also laughed heartily. Looking around to make sure there were no more enemies, he suddenly shouted, "Dharma Supreme! Send more people out. Us brothers are not dead yet, we can still fight. Send more people, I haven't killed enough." The Dharma Supreme said coldly, "Since you haven't killed enough, I'll fulfill your wish." He waved and shouted, "Send another 3,000 people. Don't move anyone above Supreme Martial Artist. I'd like to see how many more people they can kill." The 8th grade Supreme Martial Artist, who was receiving orders at the side, almost fainted. Although the other party was already seriously injured and on the verge of collapse, he was still an expert at the level of a low-grade Supreme Martial Artist after all. The Dharma Supreme was only sending 3,000 people? And he wanted those above Supreme Martial Artist to stay put? Wouldn't that be sending people to be slaughtered for fun? Why? The Dharma Supreme rolled his eyes. This is a little inappropriate. The 8th grade Supreme Martial Artist murmured, subconsciously replying. Inappropriate? The Dharma Supreme sneered. Suddenly he stretched out his hand with his palm facing outwards and pulled back. An abnormally strong force suddenly appeared and confined this 8th grade Supreme Martial Artist in an instant. An invisible vortex was formed in an instant. The Dharma Supreme frowned and his eyes sharpened. A thick and dense demonic aura appeared. With a sudden sound, the entire body of the 8th grade Supreme Martial Artist was sucked up, somersaulted in the air, and flew towards the Dharma Supreme's palm with his head in front and legs behind. As he flew closer and closer, his whole body actually emitted a series of crackling sounds, and his whole body actually shrank rapidly amidst these crackling sounds. Yes, it shrank, his whole body was shrinking rapidly. Finally, when he hit the Dharma Supreme's palm, his whole body was only the size of a rabbit. With another "pa" sound, the Dharma Supreme's right hand suddenly closed. The body of the 8th grade Supreme Martial Artist instantly turned into powder in the Dharma Supreme's hand. When he opened his palm again, a lot of powder flowed down from his hand, turning into dust and scattering. An 8th grade Supreme Martial Artist with extremely high strength without any loss actually turned into a pile of powder in the hands of the Dharma Supreme so silently. Even though they were caught off guard, such a situation still made everyone feel extremely shocked. How strong exactly was the Dharma Supreme's strength? However, after the shock there was also fear, a fear that came from the bottom of their hearts. Since that 8th grade Supreme Martial Artist could become the Dharma Supreme's messenger, it was enough to prove that he was the Dharma Supreme's confidant. Not to mention that he did not do much wrong, just the fact that he could casually kill such a confidant showed the Dharma Supreme's madness and determination. Chapter 1689. Pass down the order. The Dharma Supreme slowly raised his slender fingers in front of himself and blew gently, blowing away the remaining powder on his palm. He said indifferently, "I don't wish for anyone to say anything inappropriate again. This word is very piercing to the ears. My orders only need to be carried out and there is no need to say anything inappropriate. Do you understand?" Yes. The other 8th grade Supreme Martial Artist at the side had already turned pale from the shock. Hearing this, he no longer had any objections and immediately went to pass down the order. Shortly after, a group of people could be seen heading towards Zhuge Zangqiong and the other two. The sounds of battle rang out again. As the sounds of battle rang out again, the Dharma Supreme closed his eyes again, the corners of his mouth still carrying a trace of a cold smile. 3,000 people were thrown into the battlefield against 3 people from the other side. It seemed like there was an extreme disparity in the number of people on both sides. To put it bluntly, it was possible to kill the other party by piling on people. However, in reality, the difference in strength between both sides was also extremely huge. The prerequisite for killing the other party by piling on people was that both parties were of similar strength. However, the actual strength comparison now was like sending 3,000 2- or 3-year-old children to besiege 3 severely injured whales in the sea. Although the whales were severely injured, as long as they could still move, they only needed to turn around casually to set off waves that would be enough to drown the 3,000 children. The situation on the battlefield now was just like that. The 3,000 people were getting fewer and fewer. In just a short while, 1/3 of them had already been lost. In such a one-sided massacre, Zhuge Zangqiong and the other two did not feel tired at all. Instead, they felt like they were recuperating and their strength was actually recovering bit by bit. This is too much. I'm not going. This is basically sending us to our deaths. This is too much. Is the Dharma Supreme out of his mind to actually make such a stupid move? Finally, in the law enforcement team, after the first batch of 3,000 people were completely wiped out, when the strict order was given again, there was an immediate backlash. After all, being unafraid of death and sending oneself to death were 2 completely different things. No one was willing to send oneself to death. Those who do not respect the order. Kill no mercy. The Dharma Supreme's cold voice rang out. The saber light flashed. In a flash, the noisy protesting crowd had already been completely wiped out. However, this action caused an even greater backlash. More people started to resist and the scene was unusually chaotic. The Dharma Supreme's face was as still as water. He still only said one word, kill. Instantly, thousands of people fell to the ground again. The arbitrariness of the Dharma Supreme made everyone feel a chill from the bottom of their hearts. The Dharma Supreme gave people a strange feeling that if they did not follow his orders, it would not matter even if he killed everyone. Felt weird, but it was true. It was real. Under such high pressure, another group of people finally rushed out. Rather than being killed by the Dharma Supreme's orders, he might as well fight with the 3 of them. The 3 of them were still severely injured. If he fought with all his might, he might still have a chance of survival. However, against the Dharma Supreme, he was doomed to die. Why can't experts above the Supreme Being fight? Ping Xiaoyun, who had been sitting opposite the Dharma Supreme and had not spoken a word for several days, suddenly spoke. Those 3 people can be considered heroes. Heroes should always have a few people buried with them. The Dharma Supreme said nonchalantly, Elder Ping, you don't have to take it to heart. Although we are enemies, this doesn't stop me from giving them some respect, that's all. Ping Xiaoyun revealed a cold smile and mocked, do you think that the burial of 1 million people was not grand enough? How much more do you want? 3,000? 30,000? Or more? That's my business, my decision. The Dharma Supreme looked at Ping Xiaoyun indifferently. Elder Ping, it won't be too late to question my decision after you become the Dharma Supreme. Now, you don't seem to have the right to question my decision. Ping Xiaoyun laughed bitterly. I really don't. Today, even my soul is under your control. I only want to ask you one thing. How can I get rid of my demonization? What method? What price? The Dharma Supreme smiled indifferently. I'm very sorry. There is no way. It can never be removed. What a pity. Ping Xiaoyun was suddenly stunned. This was because he could actually hear a trace of sincere apology from the Dharma Supreme's words. These feelings shouldn't have appeared at all, but right now he was clearly feeling this way. The Dharma Supreme raised his eyes and looked at Ping Xiaoyun. He said indifferently, if I die in the end, your soul will lose the control of its master. Either you will completely degenerate into a demon, or you will be able to maintain the last trace of clarity. At that time, if you can still maintain that last trace of clarity and do not wish to harm the world, then cripple your martial arts. This way you may be able to live out your remaining years in peace. This is the only way. Ping Xiaoyun laughed miserably and said, thank you for your guidance. If I self-destruct now, what are the chances of killing you? The Dharma Supreme said tiredly, it won't be of any use. Because the difference between our levels is too great. Even if I allow you to self-destruct, the result will be nothing more than useless. It will be a pointless sacrifice. Now, I am already invincible. The Dharma Supreme's eyes revealed a trace of concern and worry. He said softly, "In this world there may only be one person, one sword, who has the chance to kill me." Ping Xiaoyun's eyes lit up. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Is it the Calamity Sword? You are still worried that the Calamity Sword will kill you?" "Ah, I suddenly feel very relieved. There is still a way to deal with you." The Dharma Supreme shook his head and laughed, his gaze fixed on the battlefield. His heart said silently, "There is no one left in this world who knows me. No one knows my worries, my apprehensions. What I am most worried about now is that the Calamity Sword will no longer be able to kill me, and this is something that none of you understand. If I die, I can only die by the Calamity Sword." On the battlefield, the strange and unequal battle continued. Naturally, more and more people died. However, the Dharma Supreme was completely indifferent to this, as if those who died were merely ants. When the third batch of people rushed forward to besiege them, Zhuge Sanqiong and the rest were also at the end of their rope, on the verge of collapse. After all, Zhuge Sanqiong and the rest were not the same as the giant whales in the sea. The low-level cultivators besieging them were also not children. Killing people still required energy. Being severely injured, they gradually became exhausted. The huge waves that the giant whales created to drown all living creatures still needed to be produced by shaking their bodies. When the severity of their injuries reached a certain level, even shaking one's body gradually became a luxury. Just like the current situation of Zhuge Sanqiong and the rest. However, right at this moment, Yi Qinshan, who was still watching the battle from the city walls, raised his head to look at the sky. The lightning in the sky was obviously coming to an end. Although the dark clouds were still dense, that special power of the universe was already about to end. Suddenly Yi Qinshan let out a long howl. "Let's all die together. Dharma Supreme, get all your people to come out." Like a whirlwind, he took the lead and rushed down the city walls. Then all the remaining members of the Yi clan in the capital city and all the remaining martial artists followed behind Yi Qinshan like a whirlwind, charging toward the battlefield. They had already been mobilized beforehand, and now they were just generously going forward. A cold glint flashed in the Dharma Supreme's eyes. He murmured, "Yi Qinshan, you can be considered a man." With a wave of his hand he shouted, "All law enforcement officers move out. We must end this battle in the shortest time possible." All the law enforcement officers who were watching suddenly came out in full force at the Dharma Supreme's command. With a whoosh, only 2 people were left in the originally crowded base of the law enforcement officers, the Dharma Supreme and Ping Xiaoyun. Over here, a huge dragon shot out of the city gates and left in a mighty manner. On the city walls, Diwu Qingru and Ling Hanshue sided each other. Yi Qinshan's intention was very clear. The situation now was gradually becoming clearer. The lightning tribulation for the Tribulation Sword Master and the others was about to end. Once the lightning tribulation was over, it meant that there would be 14 peerless experts joining forces to participate in this battle. Just by looking at the momentum of the lightning tribulation, it was believed that any one of those experts who had endured the lightning tribulation would possess energy that exceeded the limits of this world. Therefore, once these people came out, it was very likely that they would immediately turn the situation around. Logically speaking, as long as Yi Qinshan was able to drag the battle until then, the entire outcome of the battle would be rewritten. The Dharma Supreme and the law enforcement officer army would also be on the path of defeat. No matter how heavy the casualties were, he and his Yi clan members would still be able to survive. However, Yi Qinshan didn't want that kind of safety. It wasn't that he didn't want it, but that he really didn't want it. He didn't want the safety under the protection of the Tribulation Sword Master. All of his brothers had already passed away, and only 2 of the clans were left. Yi Qinshan had long lost the will to live. Besides, Yi Qinshan also didn't want Ling Muyang to see the scene of his death. He was afraid that Ling Muyang would also be impulsive. After all, among the brothers, one of them had to go to the Heaven Palace. Ling Muyang was the only one with a clear conscience among the brothers. As for the other brothers, they were all full of sins. Yi Qinshan took the lead and rushed into the enemy formation like a whirlwind. He raised his sword and swung it down, and a series of heads flew up. He punched and kicked. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of people had already been turned into flying people in front of him. He let out a long and strange laugh. The sword in his hand danced, and his hands and feet moved together. Suddenly, countless lights flashed in the wide sleeves of his robe. This was the famous ultimate technique of the Yi clan, cold stars filling the sky. This technique was the Yi clan's magic weapon for killing enemies. To the Yi clan they would rarely use it unless it was a strong enemy. But at this moment Yi Qinshan used it without any scruples. He didn't even choose an opponent. As the lights flashed, a series of screams of people being thrown off their horses resounded in the sky. Zhuge Zhangqiong, Shi Paoxiao and the other two, who were already in a desperate situation, were shocked. Zhuge Zhangqiong cried out in disbelief, "Big brother?" Chapter 1690. Cut the crap. Hurry up and recover some of your strength. Recover as much as you can. Let us brothers fight side by side in the final battle. Yi Qinshan didn't stop. He continued to move around the three of them at high speed. The law enforcement officers around them collapsed one after another. Recover more of your strength. Even if you self-destruct later, you'll have more capital, Yi Qinshan shouted. Zhuge Zhangqiong and the other two's expressions turned stern. They replied solemnly, "Yes." Then they closed their eyes and adjusted their breathing, completely ignoring the sea of enemies around them. With Yi Qinshan here, even if the sky and earth collapsed, he would be able to hold them back for a moment. And this short moment was enough for the three of them to catch their breaths. Being able to catch their breaths was enough. Yi Qinshan's challenge came abruptly, and the speed and timing of his entry into the battle were also very coincidental. It was at the delicate moment when the third wave of 3,000 people had just formed an encirclement and surrounded Zhuge Zhangqiong and the other two. To Yi Qinshan, whose physical strength was at its peak, those 3,000 people were nothing more than fodder. It was precisely because of this that he was able to achieve such amazing results just now, and also successfully bought some time for Zhuge Zhangqiong and the other two to catch their breaths. Otherwise, with the law enforcement officer's powerful strength, how could Yi Qinshan have succeeded so easily? Yi Qinshan, are you here to die too? Prepare to die. A long howl filled with murderous intent flew over with a sharp sword light. All the 2nd grade and 8th grade supreme martial artists of the law enforcement officers rapidly gathered here from all directions. Yi Qinshan laughed loudly, his black robes fluttering like the night sky. "I'm here to die, but you'll have to have the ability to do so first. My head is here. Come and take it if you can." Arrogant. With a cold shout, an awe-inspiring sword light was already in front of Yi Qinshan. Another two people came from the left and right. One of them wielded a sword as fast as lightning. The other's palm was like a huge axe. Yi Qinshan held his sword horizontally and shouted, "Arrogant? I've been arrogant all my life. Did you only find out today?" Yi Qinshan sneered with endless mockery. His beard stood up. He had actually single-handedly stopped 3 2nd-grade supreme martial artists and an 8th-grade supreme martial artist, protecting his three brothers in the circle so well that not even wind and rain could penetrate through. Under his desperate fighting style, there was only one high-level supreme martial artist from the law enforcement officers facing him alone. He was actually forced into a disadvantageous position in such a short period of time. However, as large numbers of high-level and high-level martial artists arrived one after another, the pressure that Yi Qinshan was under instantly increased by 10-fold or even 100-fold. Fortunately, the people from the capital had also rushed over, and the battle instantly escalated. The final battle between the allied forces of the aristocratic families and the law enforcement officers had finally begun. For a moment the scene was in full swing. However, there was a long howl. Suddenly, a gust of wind came from afar. In the next moment, an extremely dense green aura surged in the sky like a wave, getting closer and closer. A clear and melodious voice shouted, "This place is already so lively we actually came late." Another voice said coldly, "Since you're late, make your move quickly." The latter voice belonged to a woman. Immediately after, a green figure, mixed with the endless green behind him, rushed into the crowd of the law enforcers and shouted, "I am the king of the 8 wastelands." Boom. Countless vines suddenly sprouted from the ground. In an instant they had already rapidly grown into ancient vines. They wrapped around the legs of many law enforcement officers who were in the midst of battle. Apart from being trapped, the vines continued to spread toward their upper bodies. Dukyu had actually arrived. At this critical juncture, Dukyu had unexpectedly arrived and mercilessly attacked, making a huge profit. Following behind Dukyu was a masked woman in black who was also extremely sharp. Her sword light was like thunder. In the instant that the law enforcement officers who were entangled by the vines were circulating their energy to shatter the green vines on their bodies, she had already ridden her sword light and flashed past their heads. Poof, 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 countless heads flew up just like that, floating and rolling in the air. Streams of blood spurted out from the necks of the people who were still standing. The person who had arrived was the leader of the 3 Heavens Dark Bamboo, Jun Shiju. It seemed that either Jun Shizhu had been in seclusion all this while, or the elixirs that Duke Yu had brought from the elf forest had played a major role. No matter what the reason was, in any case, the current leader of the Dark Bamboo had already reached the level of a 4th-grade supreme martial artist. A 4th-grade supreme martial artist couldn't be regarded as a top-notch expert in this war-torn upper three heavens. However, almost all the high-end fighting forces had been attracted by Yi Qinshan and the others at this moment. Therefore, there weren't many people left who could pose a threat to Jun Shizhu. Not to mention that there was also a top-notch expert like Duke Yu as her bodyguard. The lineup of only 2 people actually went straight in, sweeping away the wind. They carved out a bloody path through the crowd and rushed towards the core area of the battle, as if they were riding the wind and breaking the waves. Where are the people of the big clans? Jun Shizhu attacked with her sword. She flew up and shouted sternly, I am a descendant of the Jun family from back then. Do you still remember that there is a blood debt that you have yet to pay? Today is the time for you to pay your debts. Your lives are mine. Yi Qinshan, Zhuge Zhangqiong, and Shi Zhao's bodies shook as they heard these words. They raised their eyes and looked over. Amidst the sea of people, a black-clothed woman wielded her sword like a gust of wind. Wherever she passed, waves of blood would rise. Severed limbs and decapitated heads would fly all over the place. The bright red color was the same as the sky. Yi Qinshan, Zhuge Zhangqiong, and Shi Zhao exposed an extremely complicated expression on their faces. It was a strange expression of relief. There was also a faint gratification on their faces. It turned out that Uncle Jun still had descendants in his family. Sure enough, the heavens took pity on him. The heavens opened their eyes. Yi Qinshan laughed out loud and said, The blood debt of the Jun family is still vivid in my mind. We have indeed yet to pay it back. Please rest assured, creditor. We will certainly pay it back after today's battle. Today is the time to settle the blood debt of 10,000 years. Jun Shizhu was startled. She shouted, So you are here. Since you have said that you will pay it back, then pay it back immediately. She raised her sword and flew forward as she said this. Jun Shizhu glared at him and shouted, I know. Do you think I'm like you? Duke Yu smiled bitterly. This ant's temper is really always so fierce. The 2 of them rushed toward the battlefield. Fairies. The Dharma Supreme's eyes flashed. He still looked on helplessly as the 2 of them started a massacre while charging forward. He didn't have the slightest intention of stopping them. It was as if the law enforcement officers who were dying tragically at the hands of these 2 people had nothing to do with him. Yi Qinshan could be said to have turned out all his forces this time. The number of people he brought with him was naturally not a small number. He, Zhuge Zhangqiong, and the others had attracted the majority of the high-level military strength of the law enforcement officers. However, there were still a lot of law enforcement officers left. Moreover, whether it was in terms of quantity or quality, they were far superior to the manpower of the big clans. As the battle progressed, the people of the big clans had gradually fallen into a disadvantageous position. If Duke Yu and Jun Shizhu hadn't arrived at this time, they would have temporarily suppressed the battle. If he acted forcefully and temporarily pacified the situation, the battle would probably fall into a dangerous situation where it could be completely overturned at any time. Another clear and long howl sounded. A gray-robed figure flew into the battlefield like a shooting star. The moment he landed, countless people around him were sent flying by the impact of his landing. This was only the beginning because those who were sent flying were already torn into pieces in mid-air. The people who were lucky enough to survive all retreated backward in horror. Damn it, who is this? Why is he so fierce? One must know that among those who were sent flying by him, there were 2 second-grade supreme martial artist experts. Just by the power of a single landing. To be able to have such power in the entire world, there were at most 3 to 5 people who had such power. Who is this person? The newcomer roared, Dharma Supreme. How dare you be so deranged? Then he leaped up again. He flew out like a shooting star and his feet tapped on the air repeatedly. Wherever his feet landed, the law enforcement officers' brains would burst open one after another. They died instantly. And the newcomer actually leaped across the battlefield like he was treading on thin air, heading in a straight line toward where the Dharma Supreme was. Wherever he passed, dense sonic booms sounded behind him. It's Ning Tianya. Supreme martial artist Ning is here. Among the people of the big clans, someone shouted in shock and excitement. Supreme martial artist Ning. Ning Tianya. The #1 expert in the world. Instantly the whole battlefield was in an uproar again. To be honest, the results achieved by Duke Yu and Jun Shizhu were better than Ning Tianya. However, the impact of Ning Tianya was unusually huge. After all, Ning Qinya had been famous for a long time. His reputation as the #1 expert in the world was even above that of the Dharma Supreme. This point was already deeply ingrained in people's hearts. In the eyes of ordinary people, although the Dharma Supreme was extremely powerful, he was still slightly inferior to Ning Qinya. Although this was no longer the case at this moment, Ning Qinya's arrival and powerful attacks were undoubtedly a shot in the arm for the Allied forces. The Allied forces' morale was instantly boosted, and they actually suppressed the law enforcement officers' army. The Dharma Supreme raised his head and looked at Ning Qinya, who was flying over from afar. He was still calm and unperturbed. He said indifferently, "Aren't you going to attack?" Ping Xiaoyun said angrily, "Why should I attack? Ning Qinya coming to kill you is exactly what I want. If I could attack you, do you think I would have stayed silent until now?" The Dharma Supreme smiled. "Ning Qinya is still the Ning Qinya of the past, but I am no longer who I used to be. Aren't you the one who understands this the best? If you really don't stop him and I do, Ning Qinya will be dead for sure. Is he still the #1 expert in the world like he was in the past? Whether you attack or not, you decide for yourself. I will definitely not force you." Ping Xiaoyun was furious and stared at the Dharma Supreme fiercely. If his gaze was really like a sword, the Dharma Supreme would have long been cut into pieces and died. Facing the angry gaze, the Dharma Supreme smiled and was extremely calm, as if he was waiting for Ping Xiaoyun's choice. Although Ping Xiaoyun was furious and wanted to kill the person in front of him, he knew that the Dharma Supreme was speaking the truth. If it was the Dharma Supreme half a year ago, he would definitely not be a match for Ning Qinya. However, after devouring the extraterrestrial demon, the Dharma Supreme's strength had increased several times. Ning Qinya was probably no longer a match for the Dharma Supreme. In fact, there was no room for comparison between the two of them. If the Dharma Supreme attacked, this old friend of Ning Qinya would probably really die here. Chapter 1691. Besides, the Dharma Supreme was discussing with him now and did not order him. His spirit was in the Dharma Supreme's hands and he could totally order him to attack directly. Back then he had no choice but to obey. Now he had to act on his own accord and there was still some leeway. With a long sigh, Ping Xiaoyun had no choice but to make the decision to protect Ning Qinya first. He leaped out and faced Ning Qinya head-on like a black cloud in mid-air. "Old Ning, I have something to say to you." Ning Qinya bellowed furiously, "Ping Xiaoyun, why are you going against the flow too? I've really misjudged you." Ping Xiaoyun looked conflicted and said, "Old Ning, you don't understand you." Suddenly his face turned inexplicably ferocious. He roared, "Ning Qinya, give me your life," and leaped forward. Faint wisps of black aura gathered in his pupils continuously. The Dharma Supreme had ordered him not to have a chance to speak to Ning Qinya. Ning Qinya saw that Ping Xiaoyun suddenly wanted to kill him despite his nice words. He couldn't help but become even more furious and charged forward. Although Ning Qinya was no longer a match for the Dharma Supreme, his strength could still be ranked among the top 3 in the world. Although Ping Xiaoyun was an old monster over 20,000 years old, in terms of strength he was still inferior to Ning Qinya. However, it was still impossible for Ning Qinya to take him down in a few moves. Suddenly a young voice shouted, "Beat him up. Beat this old bastard to death. He says nice words but secretly uses his blade. He's not a good thing. Beat him to death, no need to give me face." From behind Ning Tianye's back, a small head that looked like it was made of jade suddenly stretched out, and a pair of black eyes stared fixedly at Ping Xiaoyun. After a while he actually said in an old-fashioned manner, "Old Ning, there seems to be something wrong with this guy. He may not be a bad thing." Ning Tianya was already locked in a fierce battle with Ping Xiaoyun. He asked, "What's wrong? What's wrong with him?" Suddenly, an abnormally strong explosion came from behind. It was so loud that everyone almost lost their senses in their ears. It was the only remaining second-grade supreme martial artist of the Zhuge clan who finally chose to self-destruct when he couldn't hold on any longer. After the self-destruction, a large empty space on the battlefield. Yi Qinshan and the others let out a roar of grief and indignation. At this moment, the dazzling lightning in the sky finally dissipated. In the capital city, a steady and authoritative voice instantly rang out, "Dharma Supreme, tell your men to stop." Then there was a whoosh sound and a storm suddenly blew in the sky. The dark clouds that filled the sky were blown away in an instant. A dozen or so black dots appeared in the distant sky. In the next moment, these black dots suddenly appeared in the sky above the battle formation. It was a group of 14 people. There weren't many people in this group, only 14 in total. However, the aura that these 14 people exuded was enough to disperse the dark clouds in the sky. No one knew where it had flown to. Just this momentum alone was enough to make everyone inexplicably shocked. How could such momentum be ordinary? When Ning Qianya arrived, his momentum was unparalleled. Compared to this, it was at most roughly the same. And Ning Qianya was alone. However, there were as many as 14 people here. 14 people who were not inferior to Ning Qianya had come together. Or even beyond that. The moment the 14 of them appeared, Yi Zichen's eyes widened. A trace of a smile flashed in Yi Qinchen's eyes. A trace of relief flashed in his eyes. He suddenly shouted, "Descendant of the Jun family." In the chaotic battle, Jun Shizhu instinctively turned around to look when she heard this. She saw Yi Qinchen, Zhuge Zangqiong and Shi Paoyang leaping up at the same time. They floated in the air and stared at her. Duke Yu's figure was like lightning, and he quickly wandered around Jun Shizhu. All the law enforcement officers who tried to get close were mercilessly killed by him one by one. He created a relatively safe environment for Jun Shizhu to talk. This old man is the founder of the Yi family, Yi Qinchen. 1,000 years ago, this old man personally planned and created the tragedy that befell the Jun family. My actions were deranged and ungrateful. This old man's heart has remained steadfast to this day. Today I can see that the descendants of the Jun family are still alive in this world. As expected, the heavens have eyes. I can die without regrets. Today I will repay the debt of blood to the Jun family right here and now. Yi Qinchen roared, "I will use the entire Yi clan to repay this debt of blood." Is it possible to repay the blood hatred of the Jun family? Zhuge Zangqiong burst into laughter. Zhuge Zangqiong was also one of the masterminds of that incident back then. Today I am willing to repay this debt of blood with this crippled body of mine. I will go to Uncle Jun's spirit in heaven and ask for forgiveness. I, Shi Paoyang, will repay this debt of blood today. Shi Paoyang shouted loudly. Then the three brothers looked at each other and smiled. They saw the calmness and determination in each other's eyes. At the gate of the capital, a person flew out like a meteor. He screamed in a shrill voice, "Big brother, don't." This person was Ling Muyang. After Chu Yang and the others had broken through, their cultivation had far surpassed Ling Muyang's. Although Chu Yang and the others had arrived earlier, Ling Muyang was still a little late. The fact was that a little bit of difference had already happened. Ling Muyang had just arrived at the city gate when he heard Yi Qinchen's roar. He couldn't help but be scared out of his wits. He rushed over with all his might. A warm and sincere smile appeared on Yi Qinchen's face. He said, "Muyang, if you have the chance to meet our parents in the future, tell them that we died a long time ago. Don't ever spread this embarrassing news. It'll bring shame to our ancestors." Zhuge Zangqiong and Shi Paoyang nodded and smiled at the same time. "Brother, please." Then, amidst Ling Muyang's heart-wrenching screams, the three people in the sky split into three different directions and rushed down toward the place where the law enforcement officers were the most densely packed. If you do something wrong, you will eventually have to pay the price. You will eventually have to pay back what you owe. Yi Qinchen's laughter filled the whole world and didn't stop for a long time. In the next moment, three extremely powerful explosions rang out at the same time. Boom, boom, boom. Waves of smoke and dust rose, covering the sky and the sun within 1,000 miles. A total of 3 second-grade supreme martial artists self-detonated together. In such a densely packed battlefield, there was no time to distinguish between friend and foe. After the self-detonation, more than 100,000 people from both sides were killed. Of course, the law enforcement officers had more people on their side, about a ratio of 7 to 3. Heaven and earth suddenly fell into silence. Outside the battlefield, Ling Muyang, who was running wildly, was suddenly stunned. Then he fell to the ground. A second-grade supreme martial artist, a top expert of the generation, actually slipped and fell while running. And he fell in such a sorry state. Then Ling Muyang sat in a daze for a while. Suddenly he covered his face with both hands and burst into tears. Chu Yang and the others had just arrived in the sky above the battlefield when such a thing happened. The aftermath of the explosion naturally didn't affect them, but they didn't expect that Yi Qinchen and the others would actually self-detonate even when strong reinforcements arrived and they could already save their lives. They don't want to accept our kindness and are even more unwilling to live under our protection. Mo Qinji was so clever that he had already deduced the whole story in an instant. Chu Yang and the others could only sigh. In the crowd, Jun Shizhu, who had gotten her revenge, didn't feel much joy. Instead, her eyes were a little confused. She just relied on her instincts to kill randomly. Suddenly she felt that everything in front of her was so illusory. If that was the case, why did they do it in the first place? She had given up everything to do this. The only hope she had was for revenge and to restore the reputation of her family. However, just when she saw hope, all her enemies had disappeared. This result made her feel an extreme sense of loss. Since you feel guilty, why did you do it in the first place? Did I work so hard for so many years just to see you self-detonate today? Seeing that she was a little dazed, Duke Wei could only attack even more tightly to block the enemies and prevent her from getting hurt. At this moment, Jun Shizhu was only relying on her instincts to deal with the enemies. Any high-level supreme martial artist could easily take her life. How could Duke Wei not deal with her carefully? In the distance, the Dharma Supreme stood up gracefully. Then he took a step forward and was already in the air, standing face to face with Chu Yang and the others. Chu Yang, the current Tribulation Sword Master, congratulations on your great improvement, the Dharma Supreme said with a sigh. Why aren't you asking them to stop? Chu Yang said angrily, do you want all the martial artists in the heavenly layer to die? Do you know what you are doing? The Dharma Supreme shook his head slightly and smiled warmly. How can I not know what I am doing? Of course I know what I am doing. Swordmaster Chu, you are just unaware. There is no need for these high-level martial artists in the heavenly layer to exist. It is best if they are all dead. Once this sentence came out, everyone present was enraged. The atmosphere was on the verge of exploding. However, Wu Jueqing took a step forward and stopped everyone who was ready to attack. He looked at the Dharma Supreme with a complicated gaze and asked in a deep voice, why do you say so? It was Wu Jueqing who was experienced in worldly affairs. Under such a delicate situation, he calmed everyone's emotions and did not start the battle immediately. Instead, he asked the Dharma Supreme for an explanation. The Dharma Supreme smiled, sighed and shook his head. Then he said, everyone, ever since the Great Change 100,000 years ago, the heavenly layer has become too unbalanced until now. Especially the law enforcement officers, they are already rotten to the core. The political power of a country can only be maintained for a few hundred years at most before it is already rotten to the core. Moreover, the law enforcement officers have been in power for 100,000 years. Once these words came out, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji both showed a thoughtful look. Since ancient times, natural selection and the strong are respected. This law is naturally correct. However, as the population increases, it is gradually no longer applicable. The stronger the person, the more trouble they cause. Chapter 1692. As the Dharma Supreme spoke with a smile, he gestured with both hands. Waves of black fog emanated from his hands and dispersed faintly. Below, the bodies of countless law enforcement officers who were still alive also emitted some black fog. Although it was so faint that it was almost invisible to the naked eye, it was real. The law enforcement force is like a completely rotten regime. After 100,000 years of baptism, it is already time for it to be destroyed. It is just that the heavens did not allow the final tribulation to happen. Now that all of you have come out, I naturally have to destroy them. For a force like this, it is useless to just change a few of its leaders. Since they are going to be destroyed, then I will destroy them from the roots, all of them, together. I will cleanse the whole world thoroughly, bathe the world in blood, and pacify the world. The Dharma Supreme smiled lightly, his eyes full of cruelty and coldness. From top to bottom, from the headquarters of the law enforcement officers to the branches and groups of the law enforcement officers at the lowest level, in 100,000 years, when have we ever treated ordinary people as humans? Even if an ordinary person has a beautiful daughter, she will often be the cause of disaster for the whole family. And how many such things have happened in the past 100,000 years? The law enforcement officers stop others from doing it, but they themselves enjoy it. This kind of law enforcement is already insane. Since that is the case, so what if it is destroyed? Isn't it a blessing for the world? Chu Yang said coldly, unfortunately, now that you are bathing the world in blood, how many innocent people will be implicated? Do you know? The Dharma Supreme said coldly, implicate the innocent? That is not important. I am only in charge of bathing the world in blood. Innocent people and whatnot are meaningless to me. If I don't start a world war, how can I completely bathe all the high-level martial artists under the heavens in blood? If I don't kill them all, how can I pacify the world? The Dharma Supreme burst into laughter. I am a maniac to begin with to do such a thing. So what? The number of people fighting below was getting smaller and smaller. This was the case for both sides. More than 1 million people participated in the super war. At this moment, those who were still alive and standing were no more than 200,000 people. The remaining men of the Yi clan and the martial arts experts in the capital were mostly dead. Only the last, less than 10,000 people were struggling to hold on. However, they had already been compressed into a small encirclement and kept falling. Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang flew down to rescue more than 10,000 people. But the Dharma Supreme, who was still negotiating with Chu Yang and the others in the sky a moment ago, suddenly moved. With a sway of his body, an illusory figure suddenly flew out. The real body of the Dharma Supreme was still in the air, facing off against Chu Yang and the others. However, this illusory figure flew down and actually arrived in front of Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang. He flew to the sky above the people who were surrounded, and his hands swept out like a gust of wind. "How dare you!" Gu Duxing flew into a rage. The black dragon sword turned into a rain of swords and rushed over at an extremely fast speed. Dong Wuxiang did not even glance at him. His black saber flicked up and swiftly hacked at the Dharma Supreme's phantom. The full power of the sword and the saber was extremely powerful. It was truly incomparable, and it possessed the momentum to shake the heavens and the earth. Boom! At the moment when the illusory figure of the Dharma Supreme received the combined attack of the saber and sword. Unable to withstand it, it shattered violently in the sky like a piece of glass. Although the illusory figure was weak, the fan-shaped attack of the illusory figure still landed. Immediately after, a series of screams sounded, and thousands of people fell down like the autumn wind. The illusory figure of the Dharma Supreme that was casually created actually had such power. One must know that those who could survive until now, even if their physical strength was greatly depleted, still had to reach a certain level of strength. Any one of them was not an ordinary person, but none of them could withstand the power of this palm strike. The voice of the Dharma Supreme came from the sky. "Victory is in sight. Attack with all your might and leave no one alive. Complete this battle as soon as possible at all costs." Boom. Upon hearing this order, the law enforcement officers below seemed to have gone completely mad as they charged towards the remaining 2,000 to 3,000 people. In just a breath's time, the mission was actually completed completely. On the other side, Ning Qinya looked at the palm strike of the Dharma Supreme's phantom, and even the hair all over his body stood up. Then he let out a sigh. He had always been known as the #1 expert of the heavenly layer, but the attack of the illusory figure created by the Dharma Supreme's real body actually surpassed his full power attack. How could he not be shocked? The Dharma Supreme had actually become so powerful? How could this be? But the truth had already appeared before his eyes? So, he was actually a frog at the bottom of a well? Opposite him, Ping Xiaoyun suddenly stopped his attack and panted violently. His expression was complicated, and white foam was actually slowly coming out from the corners of his mouth. "What's wrong with you?" Ning Qinya frowned and asked. His previous attack was undoubtedly powerful, but Ning Qinya knew that it was impossible for him to take down Ping Xiaoyun in a short period of time. For a veteran expert like Ping Xiaoyun who had lived for thousands of years, he had a long pulse and was best at fighting protracted battles. However, how could such a situation occur before his eyes? It was hard to understand. "I was plotted against by the Dharma Supreme and was already unable to control myself," Ping Xiaoyun smiled sadly. "I was previously trapped by the Dharma Supreme's demonic technique and was unable to resist. Right now, he has relaxed the suppression on my spirit, which is why I can speak to you like this. Otherwise, I can only fight you to the death." Ning Qinya turned pale with fright. "It's the legendary heavenly demon devouring soul?" Ping Xiaoyun nodded sadly and said, "The Dharma Supreme is now invincible in the world. In the entire heavens no one will be his match. He is truly invincible in the world." Ning Qinya's brows were tightly knitted together. High up in the sky, Chu Yang and the rest had already surrounded the Dharma Supreme. Chu Yang's eyes were sharp and cold as he said, "Dharma Supreme, do you really want to annihilate all the high-level martial artists? Wash the world with blood?" The Dharma Supreme did not seem to care that he was surrounded by 14 super experts. He still smiled freely and said, "Not counting the lower 3 heavens, even the upper 3 heavens have been cleaned up by me. How can there be any remaining evil in the upper 3 heavens where I am? This seat will not allow anyone on my must-kill list to escape. I am the Dharma Supreme, I am the heavenly demon, and besides I am also Diwu Chochang." The Dharma Supreme said softly, "I am the heavenly demon, destined to destroy the world. I am the Dharma Supreme, no matter how the previous Dharma Supremes were. If the law enforcement officers are corrupted in my hands, they will end in my hands. Also, I am also Diwu Chochang, one of the previous tribulations. Therefore, I have the same obligation to purify this continent. As long as I can achieve my goal, the means are only the process, the results are the most important. Although after today I may not be the person with the highest authority in the heavens, a world that has been completely destroyed by me, after all the high-level martial artists have been massacred, it will be easier for others to clean it up. At the very least, with so many fewer high-level martial artists, this continent will be easier to manage. The Dharma Supreme laughed. In this war, more than 30 million people have died so far. Among them, 20 million were martial artists above the martial emperor level. All the sins, all the bloodshed and all the karma will be borne by me alone. It has nothing to do with anyone else. I am the heavenly demon. The heavenly demon is the calamity, plundering and reorganizing the world. I did it. I will bear it. So what? The Dharma Supreme laughed loudly. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji looked at the Dharma Supreme in front of them. If the local people can't make a living, the other country will definitely send troops to destroy them. Only by continuing this cycle can there be peace and survival. Chapter 1693. Perhaps after a very, very long time, there will be a wise and bold ruler who will unite the world once again. However, the continent is so vast that it is impossible for a single country to govern it. As long as it lasts for a little longer, perhaps a few decades or even a few centuries, it will rot again, and the power will be scattered everywhere. At that time the world will fall apart again. This cycle repeats itself. Perhaps in a small part of the Shan the people will fall into hardship, but in most of the Shan, they will still live in a peaceful and prosperous place, resting and recuperating. This is the complete way of survival in the continent. The Dharma Supreme smiled coldly and concluded. The Dharma Supreme's words do make sense. Mo Tianji clapped his hands and said, "What about the law enforcement officers? As I said earlier, the enforcers can exist, but they can't belong to any country. They can only be established outside of the secular world, and they don't care about the affairs of the world. Only when some uncontrollable devil appears in the human world, will they come out with their swords. If the rulers of the various countries are dissolute and tyrannical, the law enforcement officers also have the power to set up a monitoring system. If they are not virtuous, they can replace them with other virtuous people." Great! Mo Tianji's face was full of admiration. Chu Yang let out a long sigh. "It's a pity that the world is destroyed today and the sins are still heavy," the Dharma Supreme said coldly. "That's right, someone has to bear this sin eventually. Chu Yang, as the Tribulation Sword Master, you are still too soft-hearted. Thinking back to when the world was unified in the past, which one of them didn't kill until there were mountains of corpses and seas of blood? How many people have you killed in your generation? Since you can't bear to do it, I will lend you a hand." The Dharma Supreme said indifferently, "Anyway, my sins are heavy. Even if there are more, it won't be a big deal." Uran smiled strangely and said, "Chu Yang, I have said so much to you, but there may not be a future. If you really want a future, you have to defeat me first. Kill me? You can't defeat me. The future is empty. If I win, this continent will be mine. This continent will be my world. That way, everything on the continent will naturally become a branch of the heavenly demon. It will also be extremely beneficial to my future development." Chu Yang frowned and said, "As expected, you still insist on fighting." The Dharma Supreme laughed heartily. His long hair danced in the air like countless demonic souls, and his eyes shone with malevolence and madness. He said loudly, "Under the heavens only I am supreme. I want to turn a human into a demon. Everywhere I look, it will be the heavenly devil continent. I want someone to become an adult or a heavenly layer. However, after being a human for so long, I feel that it's better to be a sky fiend where I can do whatever I want. Do as you please." The Dharma Supreme laughed maniacally as he retreated swiftly. "You Ling Shue Feng Euro Ning Tianya Ling Muyang Wu Jueching. All of you back off. I don't want to fight with you. Come, come, come. Calamity Sword Master. You alone are no match for me. You have your brothers with you. Come at me together. Come and fight me. Under this sky, I want to witness whether the legend of tribulation can continue to be a legend, or whether the will of the heavens belongs to me. The legend has been written, and today is the final chapter." The Dharma Supreme's figure shot up into the sky like a dark shooting star. A ball of crazy demonic fog exploded, and the entire sky was dyed black. A black that was darker than the night, so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers. Below, the 200,000 law enforcement officers who were lucky enough to survive on the battlefield all screamed at the same time. Black smoke rose from the top of everyone's head, and countless black smoke gathered towards the Dharma Supreme. Or rather, it flew towards the demonic fog at the end of the sky. After the demonic fog rose, the 200,000 people who screamed all spasmed for a while and fell to the ground. They struggled in pain, screamed, and finally twisted their bodies and stopped moving altogether. The Dharma Supreme actually forcefully gathered the heavenly devil's soul that he had planted previously at this moment, and destroyed all the heavenly devil's soul imprints that he had collected in his body. He had completely wiped out the last bit of strength of the remaining law enforcement officers. It wasn't just here. Even the law enforcement officers who were scattered all over the place to hunt down the remaining members of the big clans also strangely fell to the ground at the same moment, and then they stopped breathing. In the capital, a patch of the darkest black gas rose. Those were the law enforcement officers that the Dharma Supreme had sent to exterminate the Yi clan. They were also killed at the same moment. In a dense forest, Yi Xiu was covered in blood, and he was fleeing pathetically. His heart was filled with endless despair. He had come out to look for medicinal herbs for his aunt Yi Chuchen and finally found them. Before he could rejoice, he was chased by the law enforcement officers. Until now, Yi Xiu didn't even know what had happened. He had been fleeing and fighting all the way. He was like an arrow at the end of its flight. Behind him, the two law enforcement officers were getting closer and closer, and the sinister smiles on their faces could be seen clearly. Yi Xiu lost all his strength and fell to the ground. He laughed bitterly. I didn't expect that I, Yi Xiu, would actually die here. It's a pity that my aunt's medicine has arrived. The two of them came at lightning speed and laughed. Yi Xiu, Yi Sangong, give me your lives. Their swords and sabers shone and slashed down rapidly. Yi Xiu laughed bitterly and closed his eyes. But after waiting for a while, they still didn't arrive. What pain! He couldn't help but feel curious. He opened his eyes and saw that the two of them had an extremely fearful look on their faces. They raised their swords but couldn't bring them down. They stood in a weird posture, and then a puff of black smoke came out of their heads. The next moment they fell to the ground, spasmed and twisted a few times, and then stopped moving. Dead? Yi Xiu sat on the ground and looked at the two of them weakly. He didn't even have the strength to go forward and check. Seeing that the two of them were indeed motionless and their bodies were gradually stiffening, he was sure that they were really dead. The mountain breeze blew, and Yi Xiu felt cold all over. He couldn't help but pat his chest and cry out in relief. Mamma mia! Thank goodness they're dead. I was really scared to death just now. His old illness had actually relapsed in his surprise. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a trap. Oh my, did something really happen? Looks like I have to go back and take a look. Yi Xiu finally stood up, shaking his butt delicately. He had made up his mind. Despite the pain all over his body, he couldn't help but cry again. I'll never come out again? It wasn't just here. The same thing happened to countless people in the entire continent. On the battlefield. Ah, how satisfying. How satisfying. The Dharma Supreme laughed maniacally in the midst of the demonic fog. Jianghu was furious. His tribulation sword flashed and appeared in his hand. He shouted, "Brothers, follow me." With a flash of light and the sound of thunder, Jianghu took the lead and charged into the demonic fog with his sword. Mo Qianji and the rest followed suit. Wu Jueqing and Moon Breeze were also furious. They flew after them, intending to lend Jianghu and the rest a hand to kill the Dharma Supreme. However, when they arrived outside the demonic fog, Wu Jueqing and the rest discovered to their surprise that they were isolated by an invisible barrier. They couldn't enter. It wasn't just them. Even Mo Lei, and Chu Lu, who had advanced together with them, couldn't enter when they arrived at the boundary of this demonic fog. This demonic fog actually prohibited anyone other than the current Tribulation Sword Master and Tribulation from entering. Only 10 people could enter. Chuyang, Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang, Mo Qianji, Mo Qingwu, Luo Kadi, Gmo, Ao Shiyun, Rui Badong and Xiadanxiong. Moon Breeze and the rest were even more furious when they saw this. They used all their means and attacked the black fog madly. However, no matter how powerful their attacks were, when they landed on this demonic fog, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no trace of them at all. Ha ha. The Dharma Supreme's laughter could be heard from inside. You don't have to waste your efforts anymore. The power of the dead souls gathered from the more than 30 million dead souls in this battle has all been used by me to construct this barrier. You won't be able to break it. In this world, There is no other person who can understand the power of tribulation better than me. Wu Jueqing was the first to retreat. He sighed sadly. The Dharma Supreme was right. In this world, there was indeed no other person who could understand the power of tribulation better than him. In this aspect, Ning Qinya couldn't do it. Moon Breeze couldn't do it. Although Diwu Qingru was widely acknowledged as the wise man of the world, he wasn't a tribulation and couldn't understand it at all. Mo Tianji, who was also the brains of tribulation, couldn't do it either because he was young. In this aspect, the Dharma Supreme had tens of thousands of years of experience. Even the tribulation sword master Chu Yang couldn't do it. The reason was the same as Mo Tianji's. How could 3 to 5 years of experience compare to tens of thousands of years of tireless experience? The gap between them was obvious. Originally there was an exception, Wu Jueqing. As one of the previous tribulations, he had lived longer than the Dharma Supreme. Unfortunately, he didn't rely on his brains to make a living. No matter what, he couldn't be compared to the brains of tribulation. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the demonic fog in the sky started to fluctuate. As it fluctuated, it actually rose higher and higher. Clearly the people inside had started to fight. Everyone looked worried. Chu Luer grabbed Wu Jueqing's sleeves tightly and asked, "Teacher, are Big Brother and the rest all right?" Emole looked over with concern. Although the two girls also knew that Wu Jueqing didn't know the inside story, they still hoped to get a definite answer so that they could be at ease. Wu Jueqing heaved a long sigh and said seriously, "They will definitely be fine. The legend of tribulation isn't something that can be rewritten." At this moment, perhaps only Wu Jueqing could truly understand what the Dharma Supreme was up to. At the end of the day they were the same kind of people. But it was also precisely because of this that Wu Jueqing felt all the more bitter and sorrowful in his heart, unable to bear it any longer. Corpses were strewn all over the place, stretching for thousands of miles. The pungent smell of blood filled the air. "Let's deal with the corpses first," said Wu Jueqing. Chapter 1694. Looking at the fire not far away that was still burning because of the kerosene, everyone didn't know what to feel. Tens of millions of heroes were burned to the ground just like that. Such a scene truly caused one to have no choice but to look up to the sky and sigh endlessly. In the sky, in the demonic fog, the Dharma Supreme stood with his hands behind his back. For the first time, his body exuded a strong fighting spirit and endless murderous aura. "Let's fight." Chu Yang looked at him with an unusually complicated expression. He said in a low voice, "Dharma Supreme, do we really have to do this?" The Dharma Supreme chuckled, a sharp light flashing in his eyes. "Don't think that my act of exterminating the world is really to earn some great merit. I'm doing good, right? Chu Yang, let me tell you today, either you die or I die. Either you rule the world or I poison the world." Chu Yang took a deep breath and shouted, "All right. Since that's the case, let's fight to the death." The Calamity Sword flashed, and an extremely strong and awe-inspiring sword intent appeared in the air. A blazing white sword light spanned hundreds of feet, shining brightly. Gu Duxing slowly drew out the black dragon sword and held it horizontally across his chest. Dong Wuxiang raised his black saber lightly, the blade facing outwards, shining brightly. Mo Qinji flipped his wrist, and a purple jade flute suddenly appeared. Mo Qingwu's red sleeves fluttered, and the saber light of the Qingwu dream saber was like a dream. Ao Shiyun let out a long roar, and his body suddenly spread out, turning into a golden dragon that was 400 to 500 feet long. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws, soaring into the air. Rui Badong let out a sigh, and a brilliant light bloomed in the air. A beautiful 7-colored phoenix stood in the air. Ji Mo's hand slowly pressed on the hilt of his sword. Luo Kadi stood on his left and right, their swords already buzzing in their hands. Xie Danxiong took a step back. His fair fingers flashed and a flower suddenly appeared on it. Viburnum flower. On his fingertips, it whirled, reflecting a dazzling and mysterious color. Chu Yang gave the order, and the 10 people on his side spread out with a swoosh. They formed a big circle, facing each other, but also forming an encirclement. Ambush from all sides. One person in charge. And the person in charge. Of course it was Chu Yang. There was no arrangement, but the position that everyone occupied was the most suitable place for them. The main attacker was Chu Yang. The 3 main attackers were Gu Duxing, Dong Wuxiang and Rui Badong. The 3 assistants were Mo Luo Kadi, Ao Shiyun. The person at the back was Mo Qingwu. The person at the center was Mo Tianji. The one who was wandering outside was Xie Danqiong, the viburnum flower. There was an invisible and inextricable connection between everyone and any other person. If one person moved, all 10 of them would move and one person would receive the force. Collective relief. Such a formation, even in the eyes of the Dharma Supreme, was flawless. Once the formation was formed, an overwhelming pressure rushed toward the Dharma Supreme. Clouds and mist swirled wildly, and black gas wreaked havoc everywhere. Today's battle will put an end to the past. The Dharma Supreme laughed maniacally, his voice shaking the sky. Tribulation Sword Master. Calamity Sword. Suddenly his entire body shook. His black robe fluttered in the wind and then floated in the air. His long hair suddenly flew up and fluttered in the air. The Dharma Supreme raised his head abruptly. His pitch-black eyes pierced through the air and landed on the 10 of them. A powerful aura, as if it could destroy the world, rose. Driven by his aura, even though Chu Yang and the rest had improved their cultivation, they still could not help but feel their clothes fluttering behind them. Everyone felt as if they were facing a level 12 storm. Their mouths and noses froze for a moment. In the eyes of Chu Yang and the others, the current Dharma Supreme was more like a demon god that had suddenly emerged from the netherland. With boundless darkness, boundless murderous aura, and unparalleled terrifying power, he had arrived in a domineering manner. This was a strange battle that surpassed the limits, and even surpassed everything that was known. Whether it was the Dharma Supreme or Chu Yang's group of people, everyone had already surpassed the limits of the heavenly layer. However, they knew nothing about their current level and the levels that they would reach in the future. It was the same for each other. No one knew what level they were at now. They also did not know what level the other party was at. However, the intuition of a martial artist could clearly sense that the other party was very powerful. Chu Yang could even feel that even though they had gone through such a huge upgrade, they were still slightly inferior to the Dharma Supreme who had absorbed the entire extraterrestrial demon. This was not too unexpected. Previously, the Sword Spirit had already predicted that the extraterrestrial demon was a super expert who had reached the heavenly layer. Even though the Dharma Supreme might not reach the peak of the extraterrestrial demon's strength after absorbing all of it, it would not be too far off. Even though the effects of the Heaven-Earth Mystery Yellow Fruit were amazing, by the time Chu Yang and the rest consumed it, most of its effects had already dissipated. Moreover, it was divided among the 14 of them. Even though the 14 of them had improved greatly and broken through the limits of the heavenly layer, their actual progress would probably stop at the earth layer. Therefore, Chu Yang felt that there was still a gap between him and the Dharma Supreme. However, Chu Yang was not afraid of this. At the moment when the group of brothers took out their weapons at the same time, the 10 of them all rose in their hearts. The same confidence rose in them. We will definitely win this battle. This was an extremely subtle and mystical feeling. So what if your demonic prowess is overwhelming? So what if your demonic prowess is unparalleled? Because I have my brothers by my side. My everything, is by my side. Facing the Dharma Supreme's overwhelming and terrifying pressure, Chu Yang suddenly felt a sense of heroism. He looked up to the sky and shouted, "One ray of cold light pierces 10,000 feet." This sentence was not only an exhalation, but also a command to attack. The 10 of them moved together. The Calamity Sword shone brightly. Suddenly, 10,000 rays of cold light illuminated the sky. It was as if cold stars had suddenly appeared in the dark night sky. Although they couldn't completely disperse the darkness, they couldn't block out the specks of starlight even though it was pitch black. Chu Yang leaped up with his sword and took the lead to attack. Gu Duxing's gaze was as sharp as a sword. His body stood straight and the next moment he turned into a sword light that left his hand. Sword of Solitude, Unruffled Heart. The two peerless sword experts attacked with all their might. The Dharma Supreme understood the Calamity Sword technique the most. To him, this type of sword technique was the greatest threat but also the least. Seeing Chu Yang attack, he shouted, "Good move." A black shadow flashed and was about to attack. Previously, when he faced the Calamity Sword technique, he still had to carefully choose the right time and set up the corresponding targeted strategy. But now, the Dharma Supreme, whose strength was much higher, did not need to worry so much. The Dharma Supreme was confident that even if his targeted counterattack could not defeat Chu Yang's attack, it could at least gain the upper hand and dominate the battle. However, there was a change because Gu Duxing had also arrived at the right time. The Dharma Supreme frowned. He could be said to understand all the changes of the Calamity Sword technique, but the moment Gu Duxing attacked, he actually lost control of the Calamity Sword technique, causing the entire battle to become confusing. The power of the Calamity Sword technique, with the cooperation of the Calamity Brothers, actually increased by several times. Gu Duxing's attack behind him was obviously not the Calamity Sword technique, but it gave the Dharma Supreme a real feeling of, what harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? This unusually real feeling was as if there were two masters of the Calamity Sword attacking him at the same time, one from the front and one from the back. They were both so sharp and so powerful. And this strange feeling had never appeared before, even when his brothers were still together. This unexpected change made the Dharma Supreme feel as if he could no longer control the entire battle. Strange. Demonic fog gushed out of the Dharma Supreme's body. His left hand pushed horizontally and his right hand struck back. The whole sky suddenly exploded, and the mountains and rivers shook at the same time. The Dharma Supreme's two hands were facing Chu Yang's Calamity Sword and Gu Duxing's Black Dragon Sword. However, his left hand was pushing horizontally, and actually found the edge of the Calamity Sword in an impossible situation and pushed along it. The sharpness of the Calamity Sword was something that even the Dharma Supreme did not dare to recklessly try. Chu Yang suddenly felt an extremely uncomfortable feeling of defeat. The sword momentum that should have been completed in one go suddenly had a feeling that he had found the wrong direction, and that his hand had slipped. He couldn't help but rush towards the other side along with his sword. On the other side, the Dharma Supreme's right hand also collided fiercely with the tip of Gu Duxing's Black Dragon Sword. Other than the Calamity Sword, the Dharma Supreme no longer cared about any other divine weapons, even if it was a rare divine sword controlled by an expert at the pinnacle of the sword. Fist and sword collided. Both of their bodies shook violently at the same time. Both of them were dressed in black robes, and at this moment they actually bulged backwards at the same time. The Dharma Supreme's long hair suddenly floated up, and black lightning suddenly appeared in his eyes, flashing away. There was a strong sense of shock. As for Gu Duxing, it was as if he was struck by lightning. His right hand that was holding the sword almost lost all feeling, and his body unconsciously leaned back slightly. Then he forcibly stopped himself, but still involuntarily floated back 3 steps, a dark red color flashing across his face. Gu Duxing's strength had undoubtedly improved a lot, but there was still a considerable gap between him and the Dharma Supreme now. Watch my saber. Dong Wuxiang's black saber was already coming down, the saber light awe-inspiring and domineering beyond compare. The Dharma Supreme snorted coldly, still not retreating, and punched fiercely on the saber edge. With a sound, Dong Wuxiang's majestic body also trembled a little, and the black saber rebounded, almost smashing the back of the saber on Dong Wuxiang's own forehead. Dong Wuxiang roared indignantly, and exerted strength again, slashing down with all his might. Swoosh, 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 3 consecutive saber attacks came. The Dharma Supreme laughed. Satisfying. He still didn't dodge and punched 3 times consecutively, all landing on the saber edge. The sharp and heavy black saber slashed on the surface of his fist, but only a faint white line appeared and then disappeared. Dong Wuxiang roared loudly, and was sent flying into the sky by the unusually strong force of the fist. At the same time, a brilliant viburnum flower bloomed in front of the Dharma Supreme without any warning. In the dazzling bloom, thousands of sharp blades cut indiscriminately at the Dharma Supreme from top to bottom. Chapter 1695. The viburnum flower came at an incredible speed and its attack range was even wider. The Dharma Supreme tilted his body and his entire body abruptly straightened, colliding head-on with Mo Tianji's purple jade flute and kicking the viburnum flower that was still blooming behind him. Under Xie Danxiong's incredulous gaze, the viburnum flower actually flew back with a swoosh. Xie Danxiong knew very well that under this attack of his, the viburnum flower had rotated with all kinds of force and angles, a total of 72,000 times. Under such complicated changes, the Dharma Supreme was actually able to accurately kick the core of the flower. That was not all. What was even more shocking was that although the viburnum flower that was kicked back had less changes, the number of spins had increased to 80,000 times. Behind him, Mo Tianji, who seemed to be the Dharma Supreme's vital point, also staggered backward. Mo Tianji's purple jade flute had just hit the back of the Dharma Supreme's head, but the landing point was poles apart from Mo Tianji's initial landing point. Mo Tianji's initial target was the Dharma Supreme's back precisely so that he could coordinate with Xie Danxiong's viburnum flower attack, completely locking onto the Dharma Supreme from the front and back. Unexpectedly, the Dharma Supreme's reaction speed was godly and the way he reacted was even more surprising. Not only did he easily break through Xie Danxiong's viburnum flower, He even head-on collided with Emo Chenji's purple jade flute. In this collision, Emo Chenji only felt that his purple jade flute was completely ineffective. Immediately after, he felt an abundant and irresistible force counterattack and immediately retreated. Sierra and Emo had just retreated when Ao Shiyun activated his unique dragon-shaped force. His entire person seemed to have transformed into a huge dragon that was roaming the skies. The huge dragon body suddenly rolled towards the Dharma Supreme. Taking advantage of the fact that the Dharma Supreme's body was still lying flat, Ao Shiyun wrapped around the Dharma Supreme like a huge snake. Two hands viciously grabbed at the Dharma Supreme's eyes that were filled with black gas. The Dharma Supreme's body shook and dense demonic aura suddenly erupted. The huge dragon instantly vanished into thin air. Ao Shiyun let out a cry and retreated in a flash. At this moment, Rui Badong flapped his wings and swooped down. His two sharp phoenix claws had already collided with the Dharma Supreme's hands. His sharp beak fiercely pecked and at the same time, a blazing white nirvana flame violently spewed out. The Dharma Supreme exerted strength in his hands and borrowed the force to move. His entire body slid out from below like a fish. With a backhand, his palm landed squarely on Rui Badong's phoenix butt. Rui Badong let out a strange shriek and rushed out like a soaring cloud. Ao Shiyun, who had just gotten up, was knocked to the ground. Ao Shiyun shouted, "What the fuck, my butt?" Scram. Ao Shiyun kicked him away in annoyance. The Dharma Supreme slid backward, facing the combined attack of GMO and Luo Kadi, man and sword as one. It was a pity that their cultivation levels were still insufficient. The Dharma Supreme did not dodge or evade. His left hand went up against GMO, and his right hand went up against Luo Kadi. Once again he chose to fight head-on. In addition, he even had the time to kick out with his leg, easily deflecting Emo Qingwu's dreaming of a gentle dance saber. However, right in front of him, Chuyang flashed over with his sword like a bolt of lightning. The Dharma Supreme's calm expression instantly turned solemn. Dealing with GMO and Luo Kadi's attacks and deflecting Xiao Wu's saber at the same time, he lost his balance and flipped over in an almost impossible position. With a spin, he broke through Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang's saber and sword attacks from both sides again. With a swipe of his finger, a black long sword finally appeared in his hand, swaying elegantly like a folding fan. It faced Chu Yang's Calamity Sword head-on. This sword of Chu Yang's was the combination of all four sword techniques from the sword point into one. It was as powerful as thunder, unparalleled in its sharpness. The Dharma Supreme had just stood up when the sword light of the four combined techniques was already in front of him. With a few cracking sounds, the front half of the Dharma Supreme's black long sword broke instantly and then completely shattered. However, the Dharma Supreme did not seem to be surprised at all. He laughed loudly. As expected of the Calamity Sword, an old friend I haven't seen in a long time, the greatest help in the past, and the most deadly enemy in the present. The remaining half of the sword was still resisting the attacks of the Calamity Sword. The half of the sword continued to shatter, and with the recoil, the Dharma Supreme flew backward violently. Faced with this move of Chu Yang's, the Dharma Supreme, who had just experienced the consecutive attacks of the Calamity Sword, could only choose to avoid it temporarily. With a long whistle, Gu Duxing's sword, Dong Wushang's saber, Xia Danqiong's viburnum flower and Emo Tianji's purple jade flute once again struck the Dharma Supreme's body from four directions. However, even though they had already struck the Dharma Supreme's body, the four weapons seemed to have been defeated. There were only four soft sounds and no other gains. As the Dharma Supreme attacked and retreated rapidly, the four of them even felt an unusually strong recoil force. They could not stabilize their bodies and were sent flying in all directions together with their weapons. The Dharma Supreme could not help but let out a muffled groan. The strange black fog around him instantly exploded and his body suddenly disappeared. Then, with a flash, he reappeared in another direction far away from the battlefield. He shouted, "Good sword, is it Gu Duxing's sword?" Gu Duxing's face was no longer as rosy as before due to the recoil. Hearing this, he asked in surprise, "What's wrong?" The Dharma Supreme stared at him coldly. With a flip of his hand, his sleeves lifted up with a swoosh, revealing his arm. On his forearm, a wound slowly widened. Black blood flowed out from the wound and dripped down along the Dharma Supreme's arm, turning into a rising demonic fog. It turned out that the joint attack of the four earlier was not completely fruitless. The Dharma Supreme was he had also suffered some minor injuries. "Little Gu, I didn't expect your sword to already have a sword soul." The Dharma Supreme's eyes were somewhat surprised. He said, Although the sword soul is still weak and has not even fully awakened, but, since it exists, it can hurt me. Gu Duxing, you are very impressive. I have underestimated you previously. Gu Duxing was shocked and then overjoyed. Previously, Chu Yang had already shared the matter of the weapon soul with his brothers. Unfortunately, their martial arts were not strong enough, and the degree of compatibility and communication with them was also far from enough. Their respective weapons were still far from the level of spiritual communication. Although they all had a certain concept of the weapon soul, no one could truly feel what a weapon soul was. However, Gu Duxing's black dragon sword was an exception. Ever since Gu Duxing made his debut, he only had this sword with him. It could be said that the existence closest to Gu Duxing was neither the King of Hell nor Sister Xiao Miao, but this black dragon sword. It had accompanied Gu Duxing all the way to his improvement and growth. In this period of time, the black dragon sword had been constantly modified by Chu Yang and nourished by Gu Duxing's spirit. It had actually started to develop the consciousness of a sword soul. Chu Yang said solemnly, "Dharma Supreme, you are indeed impressive. The 10 of us have joined forces to attack you, and we have already gone all out without holding back. Yet you only suffered such a minor injury. Just based on your cultivation alone, I, Chu Yang, have to admit that I am impressed." Hearing this, Gu Duxing, Dong Wuxiang and the rest were all shocked. That's right, the Tribulation Sword Master and Tribulations. The 10 of them attacked together as if they were of one mind. The Dharma Supreme took almost all of the attacks head-on, yet he only suffered such a minor injury. Moreover, this was after the 10 of them had greatly improved their cultivation. They had already far surpassed the limits of the heavenly layer and were able to break through the void. How strong was the Dharma Supreme's strength? The Dharma Supreme smiled and stood with his hands behind his back. Although the Khanate heavenly demon is already damaged, his strength was definitely very strong when he was in the imperial court. However, what I devoured was his spirit. Although his spirit was greatly damaged, it was still much stronger than his physical body. After digesting all of it, I now have almost 30% of his strength when he was at his peak. Although your cultivations have greatly increased compared to before, which is already an unimaginable progress, you are still lacking when it comes to killing me. Chu Yang snorted coldly and said, "Lacking? That may not be the case." The Dharma Supreme laughed loudly. The black fog suddenly spread. Suddenly, his body shook and 10 Dharma Supremes appeared at the same time. They attacked the 10 of them at the same time in the thick fog. Although he was alone, he actually chose to split himself and attack first by dividing his strength. "Kill!" Chu Yang yelled. The people below watched as the black fog in the sky slowly rose and changed its shape. At first, it filled the sky, but after it rose, it turned into a huge black cloud in the sky. Everyone's mood was extremely solemn. Occasionally there would be a loud noise or a roar from inside. The ground, which was a distance away, would tremble uniformly. To be able to cause such signs, how powerful was the source? Everyone's hearts were filled with shock. If this unprecedented battle of the century happened on flat ground, no one would be able to survive within a radius of thousands of miles. The only result would be that everyone would be shaken to death. Ning Qinya looked at the sky in a daze and said, "Such a battle appearing in the heavens continent. It really makes one." He shook his head and didn't continue. But behind him, a tender voice let out a long sigh and continued for him. "It really makes one lose confidence." Supreme martial artist Ning's face turned red instantly. A little boy's head popped out from behind him. His eyes were sparkling as he looked at the people in front of him. He was simply beautiful to the extreme and also extremely cute to the extreme. She had a soft and tender face, pitch black hair, and lips that were as red as ripe cherries. She blinked her eyes and her eyelids were still not fully formed. They were pink and tender, and in an instant, everyone present was overwhelmed by her cuteness. He was really too adorable. How could there be such an adorable little boy in the world? Chule, Mole, and Feng Yuro's eyes lit up at the same time. "Wow!" Chule screamed, "So cute." Feng Yuro rushed up and asked anxiously, "Who is this? He's really cute." She suddenly realized. "Ning Qinya, this isn't your son, right? You've been avoiding us for such a long time. So you've been avoiding giving birth to him? You actually gave birth to such an adorable child. I've really underestimated you." Chapter 1696. Ah. Everyone was stunned. What was this? Why was he a little ancestor? What kind of seniority was this? Feng Yuro was so happy that she clapped her hands and said, "Can't you give birth to such a beautiful child?" Baby, let Auntie hug you, okay? Feng Yuro had been longing for a child for more than 10,000 years. Now that she saw such a cute little fellow, her maternal instincts that had accumulated for tens of thousands of years exploded. The little fellow tilted his head and looked at Feng Yuro with his black eyes. He thought to himself, this auntie is really pretty. Although she's not as pretty as my mother, she's still a great beauty. Hug me too. Wild. Kue tun and kue field mings yes shadow xia too. This old man stinks. Bart, so he naturally reached out his hand to agree. Feng Yuro was instantly very excited. She carefully carried a certain child over and kissed him on the cheek. Instantly, the texture was so good that she couldn't help but kiss him twice more. She couldn't stop smiling. The little fellow exclaimed and wiped his face. He complained, I'm a clean freak. Feng Yuro didn't care that he was a clean freak. She kissed him a few more times and didn't let go of him. She pinched his nose and teased him. The little fellow was helpless. What's wrong with this auntie? Has she never seen a cute baby before? Who is this little fellow? If he's not your son, you should know where he's from, right? Yu Lingxue wanted to tease him too, but he restrained himself. This little fellow is Chu Yang's son. Ning Qinya sighed. This little fellow is simply a little devil. He's my elder brother's son? Chu Lu's big black eyes froze in shock. She said in disbelief, my elder brother actually has a son? Oh my god, but how can this be? It can't be, he doesn't have a son. Ning Qinya said disdainfully, you're so young and yet you have so many problems. Your elder brother is so flirtatious. Why are you making such a fuss? The little fellow turned his head away from Feng Yuro's arms and said angrily, Old Ning, how dare you scold my father? Ning Qinya's face turned green. He really shut his mouth. He looked around the world. The person that Ning Qinya feared the most wasn't the Dharma Supreme or Chu Yang, but this seemingly adorable baby. At this moment, Chu Le rushed over, grinning from ear to ear. I was wondering why I felt so close to you the moment I saw you. So you're my nephew, little fellow. Quick, call me auntie. I'm your Aunt Le. The little fellow blinked and said hesitantly, if I call you auntie, what do I get for it? Chu Le was embarrassed. Chu Le definitely had a lot of good stuff, but it seemed like there was really nothing suitable for such a big child. However, he was feeling very good in his heart. That little girl Mo Qingwu actually wanted to be my elder sister-in-law. Now, my elder brother even has a son. Let's see how she can be my elder sister-in-law. It was a pity that she was not Sister Z's child. Elder Sister Z would be the eldest, and this little one's mother would be the second. Mo Qingwu would at most be the third. Maybe she would even be the fourth. Below, because of the sudden appearance of this little fellow, everyone was discussing fervently. The atmosphere was very lively in an instant, almost neglecting the battle of the century that was in full swing in the sky. It was just that everyone seemed to have neglected a very important point. How could this little fellow, who was only 2 or 3 years old, endure such a strong stench of blood? Previously, Ning Qinya was carrying the little fellow on his back as he fought with Ping Xiaoyun. In the high-intensity battle atmosphere formed by 2 second-grade supreme martial artists, even an ordinary 8th-grade supreme martial artist wouldn't be able to interfere, right? Above. The YGNG of the battle gradually reached a critical juncture. After a series of battles, everyone was injured, including the Dharma Supreme. Right now, his body was also riddled with injuries. This wise man, whose name shook the heavens in the past, didn't use any scheming at all in this battle. He only relied on his instincts to meet everyone's attacks head-on. Even the head-on clashes with the Calamity Sword were no exception. This kind of battle style was what Dong Wuxiang was best at. But the Dharma Supreme was Diwu Chouchang, the former think tank of the Calamity Sword. Using such a barbaric battle style should have been something he disdained the most. But now it was actually happening. This result was really incomprehensible. Just like that, the continuous tough battles caused everyone to expend a lot of energy. After 3 hours of battle, even Mo Qingwu had to fight the Dharma Supreme fiercely for more than 10 times. As for Chu Yang, Gu Duxing, Dong Wuxiang and the rest, they fought the Dharma Supreme without regard for their own lives countless times. Especially Chu Yang. The Dharma Supreme seemed to have a special affection for him. Most of the fights were on the Calamity Sword. Chu Yang gritted his teeth and held on bitterly. But the newly increased cultivation in his body was rapidly fusing completely with his body. Then it condensed. After every fight with Chu Yang, there would always be a strange look in the depths of the Dharma Supreme's eyes. Every time he clashed with the Tribulation Sword, the Dharma Supreme's body would be riddled with scars. Although the scars weren't very big, scars were still scars. However, There was still an extremely strange and complicated look in the depths of his eyes. Even his heart was like a huge wave that surged to the heavens, surging violently. Endless sadness and nostalgia, countless unforgettable memories, surged into his heart at this moment. Boss, I fought with the Calamity Sword again. Back then, how many times did we fight? Back then, you used to think that I used my brain for everything. You thought that violence was necessary. My methods were still slightly weak against the enemy, so you fought with me countless times. Every time you forced me to fight with force. Every time it was like this. Now, the Calamity Sword wielded by the current Calamity Sword Master is fighting with me again. Do you know how much I miss you? How much I miss my brothers? Now that the Calamity Sword is in front of me, I can feel that familiar pain. The pain makes my heart ache. Who is it? Boss. It's really you who is standing in front of me again. The Dharma Supreme had been smiling the whole time. His smile was casual and carefree. All the bitterness and pain, all the nostalgia, all the deep friendship were suppressed by him. They were all suppressed in the bottom of his heart. However, this kind of suppression, especially in such a familiar scene, made his heart feel even more bitter and unbearable. Gradually, it accumulated to a point where it could no longer be suppressed and exploded. It could no longer be suppressed. The Dharma Supreme could feel the murderous aura on the surface gradually dissipating. The tip of his nose was a little sore and his eyes were a little dry. Boss. I hope that after today my brothers will fly to heaven forever, while I will be alone with my melancholy. Diwu Cho-chang, haha, my name is so good. It turns out that in this life of mine, I can't help but be filled with melancholy. Both parties were almost at the end of their rope. The Dharma Supreme, who was continuously injured, had black blood flowing out of his mouth. However, he was still laughing heartily. Urun leaped into the air, and with a swoosh the surrounding black fog was absorbed into his body in an instant. Chu Yang, a bunch of robbers, looks like you are destined to be no match for me. Let me send you all on your way. The legend of tribulation will become a true legend from now on. The Dharma Supreme howled at the sky, trying his best to dissipate all the melancholy in his heart with this howl. He tried his best to turn the tears in his eyes into a roar. They had arrived at Xi'an. He had enough for this life. All of a sudden, a storm was brewing. The Dharma Supreme's strongest aura was released without reservation at this moment, causing the space in front of him to tremble. There were even some cracks that appeared in the space. Obviously, the Dharma Supreme was impatient to continue fighting with them. He wanted to end the battle with one strike. Chu Yang took a deep breath and looked at the Dharma Supreme with a sharp gaze. He said indifferently, "We brothers have been waiting for this moment for a long time. Dharma Supreme, come. Let's see who the heavens will belong to and who will become a legend." Gu Duxing laughed loudly. The black dragon sword flew into the air and stopped. The Dharma Supreme was trying his best to prepare for the final strike, but Chu Yang and the rest were doing the same too. Everyone was saving their trump cards, waiting for the final strike. The Dharma Supreme waved his hands and a large amount of solid fog spread out from his arms. Finally, it condensed into two huge wings. He flapped them in the air. That strong murderous aura almost affected everything within a radius of 10,000 miles. This was a strike that was determined to kill. Before the move was made, the aura was already there, shocking the world. The next moment, the Dharma Supreme was like a great rock with wings that covered the sky. With a force that could crush mountains and surpass the heavens, he slowly pressed down with boundless coldness. Everyone could clearly feel the Dharma Supreme's determination to finish this battle in one stroke. The formation of the 10 people was actually broken apart at this moment. Everyone could feel that although the Dharma Supreme was facing everyone, his real target was only one, Chu Yang. Everyone rushed over with all their might. However, illusions kept appearing from the Dharma Supreme's body to meet them. The illusions shattered one by one, but more were created. Not only was his actual strength depleted, but it also became more and more violent and powerful. That sudden murderous aura that could freeze one's soul made everyone's hair stand on end. Chu Yang looked up and roared. The Calamity Sword instantly shone brightly. At this moment, Chu Yang activated all the heaven-splitting divine technique and emptied all the primordial real silk in his dantian. They poured into the Calamity Sword. At this moment, the Calamity Sword finally unleashed its true power. At this moment, the light of the Calamity Sword filled the entire universe, completely overshadowing the sun. The sword aura spanned 30,000 miles. The sword light shot straight to the 10 prefectures. This was the true ultimate form of the Calamity Sword. Chu Yang's hair and clothes fluttered in the wind. The Calamity Sword in his hand danced slowly like the sun in the sky, faster and faster. In an instant, the light of the sword aura actually shone on the world. The Calamity Sword Technique. There were a total of 32 moves in the Calamity Sword Technique. Together with the 4 moves that Chu Yang had created, they were all unleashed in that instant. A total of 30 moves to kill. Chapter 1697. In the face of the Dharma Supreme's all-out attack, only the Catastrophe Sword could block it. No other weapon would do. Moreover, Chu Yang seemed to be able to sense that although the Dharma Supreme's attack seemed to be aimed at everyone on his side, there was only one true target: himself. The Dharma Supreme had stopped Gu Duxing and the rest from attacking. And Chu Yang himself would not allow his brothers to throw their lives away at this moment. Not everyone had the Heavenly Divine Technique, not everyone had the Catastrophe Sword, and not everyone had the primordial real silk in their dantian. If death is inevitable in this battle, then I shall go first. A ray of cold light pierces 10,000 fathoms, what harm is there in slaughtering the world? A sharp will buried deep does not change, gathering wind and clouds to become the emperor. The tip of the sword. A sword blade that has been famous since ancient times, whistling winds and clouds from the west to the east. The sun and moon are my generals, cleaving mountains and breaking peaks. The tip of the sword. A blade that crosses the sky for 10,000 autumns, this road leads to the netherworld, cutting off the passers-by of the mortal world, where the edge of the sword reaches, everything ends. The blade of the sword. Iron walls and bronze walls are never at rest. What more can one ask for in life? Clouds and clouds gather. As long as I am alive, there will be no worries. The guard of the sword. The hidden light of the blade is hidden in the night, strategizing for days and months. I would rather hide my entire life in exchange for the killing frenzy of the heavens. The sword pommel. I hold the power of life and death in my hands, closing my fingers. The heavens are about to fall. The clouds gather after the tribulation, blood is as black as ink outside the heavens. The sword hilt. Big and unsharp, the heavens are about to sink. No blade, no cold, the sword intent is dense. Life and death is the first thing, only the vicissitudes of life know the silence of the soul. The sword head. Light as a dream, dancing enchantingly in the sea of blood and mountains of bones. Holding the sword for 1,000 miles, not to be questioned, accompanying in life and death to the heavens. The sword tassel. In the palm, corpses as tall as mountains. Under the sword, a pool of blood surges like waves. The mortal world is the path of ruthlessness, slaying the world without retracting the blade. Self-created. A total of 30 sword moves at this moment, directly formed a storm that engulfed the heavens and the earth. The true meaning of the Catastrophe Sword Technique, in this instant, exploded to the extreme and was completely unleashed. Faced with the Dharma Supreme's earth-shattering attack, Chu Yang also pushed his own strength to the limit. Even exceeding the limit. He waved his sword like a madman. Even Chu Yang himself didn't notice that at this moment, a mysterious purple color was hidden in the endless light emitted by the Calamity Sword. The endless light almost covered the entire sky. The sword energy shot out first. Like a divine dragon, he gained the upper hand by a show of strength. Emotionji and the others, who were the closest to the battle, had the same feeling when they saw the 30 sword moves of the Heavenly Calamity Sword Technique being unleashed. At this moment, the sword light formed by the Calamity Sword was a circle. They formed a complete heaven and earth, a complete world. Inside the circle was the sun, the moon, and the stars. Inside the circle was the heavens and the earth. Inside the circle were mountains, rivers, and seas. Inside the circle were all living beings. The sword light was surrounded by a faint layer of light. However, it was also enveloped by a mysterious purple light. Glorious and magnificent. At this moment, the Catastrophe Sword seemed to have become countless living creatures. It was mixed with the vast chi of the universe, the power of primordial chaos and the profound chaos. It transformed into a brilliant and mighty galaxy in the sky. Sovereign's descent. Endless chatter. This unstoppable torrent rushed toward the Dharma Supreme without any hesitation. Halfway through the sword, Chu Yang suddenly felt that it wasn't just that. From the pagoda left behind by the purple cloud Heavenly Emperor, a vast and mighty force rushed out and entered his body through his meridians. It instantly filled up the hole in his dantian and joined the power of the sword move. The sword light whizzed and tore the void apart. Countless space cracks appeared one after another. Its speed was so fast that even the sound of a sonic boom couldn't be heard. Behind Chu Yang, a group of blurry and chaotic shadows began to explode violently. Poof, poof, poof. The power of this sword move was unparalleled in history. Even Chu Yang himself was very clear that he definitely wouldn't be able to use this move a second time in such a short period of time. This sword move was sure to win. Sure to kill. Sure to die. Chu Yang had this kind of strong confidence in his heart. Even if Shui Leihan was standing in front of him, this sword move would destroy him easily. Of course, this was just a feeling. However, to be able to make Chu Yang, who had always been steady and cautious, feel this way, the power of this sword move was already imaginable. The Dharma Supreme's eyes flashed with a strong sense of shock. Then, his expression actually changed and revealed a trace of heartfelt satisfaction. Facing this sword move that could decide his life and death, he was actually so satisfied. The Dharma Supreme was filled with emotions. Boss, today I have finally seen the final move of the Calamity Sword and also the strongest move. The demonic fog fluctuated violently and split into two sides like a rolling wave. The sword light had arrived. Chu Yang and his sword seemed to ignore the obstruction of time and space. A moment ago they were still 500 feet away, but the next moment, they had already abruptly appeared in front of the Dharma Supreme. The sword light exploded. Explosion. The Dharma Supreme laughed loudly. The demonic fog rose and suddenly exploded. The thick fog blocked everyone's line of sight. Chu Yang's sword light, heaven and earth rushed in with a whoosh. The strongest forces of both parties collided violently at this moment. It was as if two planets were approaching each other at the speed of a meteor, burning wildly and colliding violently. Then, with a loud boom, a strong explosion occurred. With a crack, the surrounding thousands of feet of space actually turned into a black hole at the same time. It shattered like glass. Streaks of black snake-shaped space densely appeared in the void. Then, that strong shock wave exploded violently in all directions. Gu Duxing and the rest were too close. When they were hit by the strong shock wave, they all let out a muffled groan. Like a bomb exploding, they were actually blasted far away and pushed out. This peerless expert who had already transcended the heavenly layer was actually unable to withstand this kind of shock wave. The shock wave brought along long cracks in space, rushing out in all directions towards the sky and towards the ground. At this moment, no one could stop it. On the ground, with this loud boom, Ning Qinya and the rest were all shocked. However, with their long experience in battle, they quickly judged the situation. At the same time, they attacked with all their might, gathering all their strength and casting out many layers of supreme martial artist protection to protect the capital city. At the same time, they gathered all their cultivation and struck back at the violent air currents rushing down from the sky. If the shock wave of this explosion really came crashing down, the only outcome for the capital city would be that not even a blade of grass would be left. The city would be destroyed and everyone would die. With a loud boom, the shock wave of the explosion finally came crashing down from the sky, spreading in all directions. Even with the combined protection and resistance of many peerless experts, the city walls of the capital city still couldn't help but crack. On the ground outside the city, deep cracks continuously appeared. Countless mountains in all directions suddenly flew up from the ground at the same time, and then fell down fiercely. After a strong tremor, they collapsed with a loud boom. Faced with such a shock wave, all the experts who had participated in the defense of the capital city, their originally calm faces instantly turned pale. They all staggered back at the same time, spitting out mouthfuls of blood. Their faces were filled with shock. Their eyes were filled with horror. What kind of power was this? High up in the sky. Gu Duxing and the rest were rushing over from afar towards that ball of black fog that was even darker than before. Everyone was burning with anxiety. They wondered how Boss was doing now. Amidst the black fog, Chu Yang's face was filled with surprise, but also with some reasonable sympathy. He just looked at the Dharma Supreme. The Dharma Supreme's face had a cold smile. He stood upright, his long hair fluttering in the wind. He also stared at Chu Yang without blinking. After a long time, a warm smile appeared in his dark eyes again, and a kind of relief and melancholy of finally being free. In front of his chest, the Calamity Sword continued to flash with a faint purple light. It pierced deeply into his heart. Only a small part of the sword was left outside. On the Dharma Supreme's back, the tip of the Calamity Sword pierced through, shining with a sparkling and translucent light, spotless. Both Chu Yang and the Dharma Supreme could clearly feel that the infinite destructive energy and devouring power of the Calamity Sword, as well as the dragon-like energy of the Sword Gang, were destroying the Dharma Supreme's life force at the fastest speed possible. A bitter smile appeared on both their faces. Chu Yang sighed softly and said, "Diwu Cho Chang, you are finally free." The Dharma Supreme laughed softly and said indifferently, "If not for my unfulfilled wish, perhaps I would have been free long ago." Just now, both of them had collided with their strongest techniques. At the beginning of the collision, both of them had suffered the impact of the other's strongest force and almost had their bodies and souls shattered. However, after the collision, Chuyang suddenly realized that there was no resistance in front of the Calamity Sword at all. The Dharma Supreme's power seemed to have been shattered, or perhaps it was because of his own inaction that the Calamity Sword pierced straight into him. At the final point, the Calamity Sword pierced deeply into the Dharma Supreme's heart. After Chuyang realized it, he immediately retracted the sword with all his might. However, he was already unable to stop the strong inertia from earlier. Sensing that the Calamity Sword had penetrated deep into the Dharma Supreme's body and was enough to cause a fatal injury, Chuyang wanted to pull the sword out and save him. However, he felt an unusually strong suction force from the Dharma Supreme's body, firmly holding the Calamity Sword in place. He tried to pull the sword out but he couldn't. Just as Chuyang was about to try using more force, the Dharma Supreme already looked at him indifferently. Their gazes met. In that instant, Chuyang already understood the Dharma Supreme's meaning. "Chuyang, even if I can live for a while longer, what's the point?" The Dharma Supreme laughed bitterly and said softly, "Just let the Calamity Sword pierce into my heart. Let me feel the pain for a while longer and feel the Calamity Sword on my body for a while longer." He smiled sadly. "I'll take it as, this is my boss's punishment for me?" At this moment, Chuyang's emotions were also extremely complicated. After thinking about it for a while, he finally said, "All right," and gave up on pulling the sword out. The Dharma Supreme looked at the Calamity Sword in his heart longingly, but a warm smile appeared on his face. At this moment, that cruel and brutal Dharma Supreme had finally disappeared without a trace. All that was left was that open-minded and serene wise man of the past, Diwu Chochang. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.